Chapter 648. Everyone's hearts were filled with shock as they watched the charming snake retreat in a sorry state with injuries all over her body. It wasn't because Tianyang had killed the charming snake so easily. In their minds, Tianyang was almost invincible among those below the heavenly ascension realm. A mere charming snake naturally wouldn't affect him that much. But what shocked them the most was Tianyang's attitude towards the charming snake. No matter what, the charming snake was still a beauty. She had a snake's tail and had a unique charm. Coupled with her bold and revealing outfit, almost any man wouldn't attack her. This was also why Long Taiji hadn't reacted in time. However, Tianyang reacted at lightning speed and stopped the attack the moment he attacked. Then, he clenched his fist and crippled the hand. He didn't have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. "My lord, the charming snake is still a beauty. Isn't it a little inappropriate for you to do that?" Long Taiji muttered in the heavenly tower. In his opinion, although the charming snake's bloodline level was a little low, she was still a great beauty. Although the snake's tail was only pretty to humans, it was very useful to dragons. Long Taiji also believed that the charming snake's charm would be extraordinary to humans as well. But Tianyang had attacked, and so decisively. If not for the fact that Tianyang always had Ling Yuhan by his side, Long Taiji would have suspected that Tianyang was gay. He had never heard of the Tianji Sword Emperor having a partner. Now that he had seen her, he still didn't have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. If he said that he wasn't gay, not many people would believe him. A beauty? That's true. But before a beauty, she's an enemy. If she's an enemy, it's good enough that I don't kill her. Tianyang played with the things in his hands casually, not even raising his head. Long Taiji was stunned when he heard that. Then he shuddered. Tianyang's words were too calm. He was so calm that it was as if this was a trivial matter. It was even more indifferent than eating and drinking. After all, when he was in the earthly imperial city, Tianyang was very interested in eating. However, Tianyang did not feel the slightest bit of emotion when it came to killing people. To say that he was cold-blooded was not necessarily true. When dealing with Ling Yuhan, Tianyang had a gentle side to him. However, when dealing with enemies, he was a killing machine that did not know what mercy was. Perhaps this is the reason why Lord Sword Emperor was able to become an emperor in the face of adversity and dominate the entire era 10,000 years ago. Long Taiji said in his heart as he looked at Tianyang, who was in a daze after fiddling with the things. "Sir, I'm back." In a tent in the northern wilderness. Charming Snake's left hand hung limply as she walked into the tent. "You're back. What took you so long? Who did it?" King Scarlet Demon had just replied when he noticed that something was wrong with Charming Snake. He looked carefully and was immediately enraged. Charming Snake was his most capable subordinate, and also his right-hand woman. She was the best person to handle daily affairs. Her combat strength was also not bad. In the end, how long had it been? Charming Snake's left arm was crippled. Looking at the limp appearance of her left arm, the bones must have been shattered into pieces. This kind of method was simply ruthless to the extreme. King Scarlet Demon did not expect that under his prestige, there would still be someone who dared to use such ruthless methods on his subordinates. Who was it? Tyrannosaurus, King Hongwei, White Demon, or Chaotic Saber Demon? King Scarlet Demon said angrily. The aura of peak 6th level C of Spirit Realm was gradually released from his body. His robes fluttered without wind, and a rolling pressure erupted. At this moment, King Scarlet Demon was truly enraged. "Neither," Charming Snake said weakly. "It was Sword King Tianyang." "What?" King Scarlet Demon's face changed greatly when he heard this, and then his face became gloomy. "I thought he was an honorable genius of the human race. I didn't expect that he was such a despicable person. The battle hasn't even begun, and he already eliminated my right-hand woman. If he wins, then wouldn't the entire demon race be exterminated by him?" King Scarlet Demon said angrily. Charming Snake sneered in her heart when she heard this. "Tianyang, you're strong, but King Scarlet Demon isn't weak either. Now that you've infuriated King Scarlet Demon, King Scarlet Demon will surely take out 120% of his strength. So what if you're stronger? King Scarlet Demon's strength was not something that the human race could imagine. Go rest now. I still have a few medicinal pills here. Quickly consume them. However, I'm afraid you won't be able to use your left arm for a year. King Scarlet Demon took out a few medicinal pills and passed them to Charming Snake, as he said with concern. Charming Snake nodded respectfully when she heard this. She put away the medicinal pills with her right hand and swayed her tail as she left. King Scarlet Demon's heart ached even more when he saw Charming Snake take the medicinal pills with her right hand. After Tianyang left, his heartache immediately turned into boundless anger. Tianyang, I originally wanted to be on good terms with you, but now you actually treat Charming Snake like this. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being unrighteous. King Scarlet Demon roared in a low voice. Then, he returned to his tent and began cultivating. At this moment, there was only one night until the battle between the two of them began. Big brother, I'm afraid that Charming Snake won't have any good intentions after she returns. Yu Jianxin walked beside Tianyang and said worriedly. He wasn't Long Taiji, who was extremely talented since young and hadn't seen the dangers of the world. Yu Jianxin had risen step by step from the lowest servant disciple to the current senior brother of the Flying Sword sect. Thus, he had seen and experienced the fickleness of the world much more than Long Taiji. Long Taiji didn't see it, but Yu Jianxin did. Her left arm has been crippled by me. It'll be strange if she can say good things when she returns. Tianyang smiled. At this moment, they had already arrived at the northern wasteland. The northern wasteland was barren for thousands of miles. The northern wind whistled, and the biting cold wind blew on one's face. It was like a steel blade, causing pain to one's face. However, Tianyang and the others didn't care about this. If it was a cultivator in the aura illuminating realm here, they might have frozen to death. Then why not? Yu Jianxin was puzzled. He raised his hand and placed it on his neck, making a throat-slitting gesture. King Scarlet Demon suddenly challenged me. Other than testing me, he probably wants to be on good terms with me. First of all, I don't like to suddenly become friends with a stranger, and a passive kind at that. Second, since he has such intentions, King Scarlet Demon most likely won't use his full strength. What's the point of fighting if he doesn't use his full strength? Charming Snake will definitely tell King Scarlet Demon that I crippled her left arm. At that time, King Scarlet Demon will definitely be angered. Tianyang stepped on the gravel of the northern wasteland and said indifferently. Chapter 649. The second day, the sun hung high in the sky. Cold winds blew across the desolate north. Even under the sun, the temperature didn't rise in the slightest. Tianyang's group and the Beast Race's group had already arrived at the battlefield. They stared at each other, not backing down at all. That's King Chi Yao. Looking at the tall and sturdy man beside the charming snake, Tianyang raised his brows and said, he had heard of King Chi Yao's name many times. King Chi Yao had even challenged him to a duel. However, Tianyang wasn't very familiar with King Chi Yao. Apart from possessing the bloodline of the howling sky nine-headed hound, peak 6th level C of Soul Realm cultivation base, and the title of King Chi Yao, he didn't know anything else. That's right. Looking at King Chi Yao's hateful eyes, you're probably right, big brother. Yu Jianxin glanced at King Chi Yao and smiled. He sighed inwardly. This big brother of mine really has godlike foresight. At such a young age, not only did he see through what the charming snake would do after returning, he even used it to achieve his goal. In comparison, Yu Jianxin, who only knew how to kill, and kill, was at a disadvantage. Yu Jianxin had also asked Tianyang why he didn't kill the charming snake. That way, he would be angered even more. However, Tianyang's answer was very simple. After killing it, King Chi Yao might not even know, or he might just go crazy. No matter which one it is, it's impossible for him to be at his peak. Hearing this, Yu Jianxin immediately wilted. Didn't one hope for the opponent to be as weak as possible in battle? When it came to Tianyang, it was the exact opposite. Before the battle, I have something to say. As Tianyang and Yu Jianxin conversed secretly, King Chi Yao's face sank slightly. He took a step forward and said, he wore an ordinary long robe with red edges and a white background. It looked very thin, but there was a ball of fur on his hands that looked like a dog's claw. It told everyone that he was a man of great power. He didn't need to fear this so-called cold wind at all. This was the terrifying aspect of the demon clan. Not only were they born with a much stronger physical body than the human clan, some low-level demon clan members even had extraordinary combat strength from the start. Although the demon clan, with a powerful bloodline, had to start from zero, they had similar talents to humans and were far superior to low-level demon clans. That was why they were considered high-level. Furthermore, under any circumstances, the demons could adjust their own bloodline and turn every inch of land they were in into their home ground. Very few humans could do this, which was why the demon clan was so powerful. Despite its small population, it was still stronger than some of the sacred grounds. Speak. Tianyang's answer was short and contemptuous. King Chi Yao's face immediately sank when he heard that. He stared coldly at Tianyang. Were you the ones who heavily injured the charming snake yesterday? Hearing this, the demons were all shocked. The charming snake had been severely injured? Then they glanced at the charming snake and realized that her left arm was hanging limply. That's right. Tianyang chuckled. Judging from King Chi Yao's expression, this guy had been successfully schemed against by the charming snake and had entered a state of anger. Since that was the case, it was time for a wave of rebellion. However, anyone can retaliate in self-defense. You should ask your assistant what exactly happened. She knows best about this kind of thing. Tianyang smiled. King Chi Yao was stunned when he heard that. When he heard Tianyang admit it so readily, he wanted to reprimand Tianyang. At the very least, he had to take the moral high ground before the battle. However, from what Tianyang said, it seemed that there was something else going on. You're slandering me. The charming snake shouted angrily. Her body was trembling nonstop. If not for the suppression of her inner yuan, her face would have turned pale. She had only wanted to take revenge on Tianyang. She didn't expect Tianyang to reveal the truth at this time. However, when she thought about how King Chi Yao was on her side and would never believe Tianyang's words, the charming snake calmed down again. No matter what, Tianyang was only a human. It was impossible for King Chi Yao to believe him. However, the charming snake didn't expect that her abnormal action would shroud King Chi Yao's heart with a layer of haze. If Tianyang hadn't hit the nail on the head, how could the charming snake have such a big reaction? As for her rapid recovery, in his opinion, it was just a cover-up. The trust that had been maintained all this time had cracked because of Tianyang's words and the charming snake's action. Whatever you say, Tianyang shrugged. He had already said what he needed to say. Whether King Chi Yao believed him or not had nothing to do with him. The reason why he said it was to clear his mind. As for whether the other party believed him or not. So what? If he didn't believe him, he would just beat him until he believed him. Charming snake, you can leave first. Meanwhile, King Chi Yao suddenly spoke. His tone was extremely calm, and he pushed the charming snake to the back with a wave of his hand. You're heavily injured right now. It's not suitable for you to come out and watch the battle. Don't be threatened by the aftershocks. King Chi Yao spoke calmly. However, this calmness was like hell to the charming snake's ears. The charming snake panicked. She'd never imagined that a single sentence from Tianyang would cause such a huge change in King Chi Yao's attitude. Tianyang was a human. She was the demon that stood on King Chi Yao's side. Why did King Chi Yao seem to have chosen to believe Tianyang? My lord King Chi Yao, don't believe what that despicable and shameless bastard Tianyang said. I really didn't. The charming snake spoke in a sharp voice. However, King Chi Yao's figure suddenly trembled when he heard this. His expression became extremely unsightly. He was a rather loyal person indeed. However, that didn't mean that he was an idiot. It would have been fine if the charming snake didn't say anything because King Chi Yao would still be suspicious. However, this scream completely shattered his trust in the charming snake. His expression also became colder. I didn't say anything. All right, you can leave now. Big Bear, Two Bears, take her away. King Chi Yao said indifferently. Hearing this, The charming snake was completely flustered. Just as she was about to charge towards King Chi Yao, two bear-like figures suddenly blocked her path. "My lord Charming Snake, please excuse us." The two men spoke in low voices. Then, they pulled the charming snake and walked towards the tent. "My lord, believe me, this is all Tianyang's lies," the charming snake shrieked. However, no one would listen to her at this moment. At this moment, the main characters of the Northern Wilderness had switched to Tianyang and King Chi Yao. Although you might be right, you still managed to severely injure a member of the demonic clan. King Chi Yao ignored the charming snake. He looked at Tianyang with a burning gaze. A demonic light flashed in his eyes. "Therefore, as the young lord of the demon race, I will not let you pass so easily." Hearing this, Tianyang smiled faintly. He raised his right hand and put away his thumb and pinky. 3 moves. Tianyang's lips curled up. Chapter 650. 3 moves. If I can't defeat you in 3 moves, then consider it my loss. Tianyang extended 3 fingers and smiled faintly. Hearing this, not only did the beast race's side explode, even the human race's side was dumbfounded. 3 moves? Even Long Taiji wouldn't dare to say such a thing. Even if Spirit King Glorious Sun was here, he wouldn't dare. King Chi Yao wasn't an ordinary peak 6th level C of Soul Realm Warrior, but a 6th level C of Soul Realm Warrior who possessed the Beast Race's King bloodline, the Howling Sky 9-Headed Hound's bloodline, the Beast Race's Young Lord. Such an existence, regardless of martial skills, cultivation base, or bloodline ability, would definitely be the best. His strength and influence were many times stronger than an ordinary peak 6th level C of Soul Realm Warrior. Tianyang actually dared to propose a 3-move agreement? Tianyang, although you're very strong, you're too presumptuous to say such a thing. King Chi Yao's face was gloomy as he looked at Tianyang and said angrily. Previously, when Charming Snake was heavily injured, he was already extremely furious. Although it was Charming Snake who did it, his anger still hadn't subsided. Tianyang was still fine. He directly taunted him and put it on his head. This was intolerable. Presumptuous? I'm sorry, but to you, this isn't presumptuous. Hearing this, Tianyang smiled faintly, as if he was afraid that King Chi Yao wouldn't be enraged and would instead add fuel to the fire, ridiculing him even more. Hearing this, no matter how good King Chi Yao's self-restraint was, he couldn't help but completely explode. "You're courting death. I'd like to see you, Sword King Tianyang. How strong can you be to say such arrogant words?" King Chi Yao roared and didn't even care about counting the sky green crystals. His dog claws burst out and ruthlessly attacked Tianyang. Seeing this, the Beast Race's people sneered in their hearts. They were all very clear about King Chi Yao's strength. Although his cultivation base was only at peak 6th level C of Soul Realm, his actual battle strength was stronger than those geniuses of martial Dao Holy Lands. A weakling at Tangba's level was just delivering food in front of King Scarlet Demon. As for Long Taiji, if it weren't for the bloodline suppression, King Chi Yao wouldn't be so afraid of him. As for Tang Fengling, who could only reach the 7th level of Sea of Soul Realm because of her special means, King Chi Yao didn't even put her in his eyes. And now, Tianyang, a peak 5th level Sea of Soul Realm warrior, had come to provoke him. Peerless Earth Tier martial technique, Sky Howling Dog Fawn. King Chi Yao let out an explosive roar as he released all of his true essence and demonic energy. Instantly, a torrent of demonic energy formed around him. Seeing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows and revealed a look of surprise. This demonic power torrent actually hindered his speed slightly. Moreover, it seemed to control the spiritual chi and space within the torrent to a certain extent. Even though it wasn't a dominion, it wasn't too far off from one. He was only at the peak of the 6th level of Sea of Soul Realm, yet he was able to create something similar to a domain. This King Chi Yao was indeed extraordinary. This is the first move. King Chi Yao let out an angry roar as a scarlet light flashed through his eyes. His large hand, which was like a dog's claw, slammed down towards Tianyang. Oh, it was as if a nine-headed dog was howling. Power, not bad. Bloodline, not bad. But, sorry, it's just too weak. Tianyang smiled faintly and extended a finger, directly exploding the sky, howling dog Fong and the torrent of demonic energy. The true essence of a peak 5th level sea of Soul Realm warrior and the terrifying power of the divine dragon body erupted. With the combination of these two, even King Chi Yao's sky howling dog Fong couldn't block it. Even King Chi Yao himself was directly sent flying by this finger. What? The demonic beasts were shocked. This move of King Chi Yao might not be his strongest move, but it was still one of the best. It was extremely difficult for them to block it. If they weren't careful, there was even the risk of being heavily injured. In the end, Tianyang only used a finger to break it. Even King Chi Yao was sent flying, as expected of the strongest prodigy of the human race. Sword King Tianyang, you really live up to your reputation. King Chi Yao stood up from the ground with a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. However, there was still a ball of fire burning in his eyes. Your strength is indeed strong, but if you want to defeat me in 3 moves, you're still far from enough. King Chi Yao smiled coldly. In the next moment, his figure suddenly disappeared. The phantom of the 9-headed dog also suddenly appeared on this piece of land. Ancient divine beast, sky-howling 9-headed dog, an existence that wasn't inferior to a true dragon. Ancestral bloodline. Lend me a hand. Half-step heaven rank martial skill, 9-headed roar. This is the second move. King Chi Yao roared, and his figure appeared in front of Tianyang. At this moment, the phantom of the 9-headed dog also suddenly erupted with 9 rays of light. The scarlet head shot out a destructive scarlet light beam. This move was extremely difficult for even Long Taiji to block. Looking at his horrified expression, it was clear what had happened. This King Chi Yao was far, far stronger than he had imagined. This move is boss's trump card. I refuse to believe that a puny little human like him can still survive this move. A petite demon youth sneered. Hearing this, all the demons nodded. They were full of confidence in King Chi Yao. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the bloodline of the 9-headed dog was the strongest in the demon race. The current King Chi Yao had even used the power of his bloodline. In addition to his true essence, which was 1 level higher than Tianyang's, why would he worry about not being able to kill Tianyang? Even if he couldn't kill him directly, he could still severely injure him. Boom! 9 rays of light violently collided with Tianyang's body. Boom, 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 boom. A series of earth-shattering explosions sounded. Every time it sounded, it would cause the earth to tremble. However, Tianyang's expression didn't change. The great void sword embryo that suddenly appeared in his hand slashed out continuously. The divine dragon body released streams of divine dragon's power to resist the invasion of the 9-headed dog's bloodline power. As for Tianyang's sword, it was constantly swinging. The swinging speed wasn't fast. However, every time it swung, it would send all the power of the 9 destructive light beams flying. It wasn't fancy at all. However, it still possessed unparalleled power. This was the power of a sword emperor. The power is not bad. The use of the power of your bloodline can be said to be perfect. However, Tianyang suddenly spoke. Hearing this, the faces of the crowd and the demons changed. Especially King Chi Yao. His change was the most obvious. To me, this move is still too weak. Tianyang smiled slightly. In the next moment, the endless spirit sea in his body suddenly boiled. Billowing true essence gushed out. The divine wilderness heaven spirit art circulated rapidly. An incomparably resplendent light appeared on his body. The great void sword embryo also released streaks of shocking light. Sky extreme sword art, 4th sword firmament. Tianyang roared angrily. In the next moment, a terrifying sword light that penetrated the heavens and the earth swept across the horizon and erupted. The 9 heads roared and instantly exploded. King Chi Yao's original form was useless. He was directly sent flying by this move and was severely injured. It was as if it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Like a hot knife through butter, it destroyed all of King Qi Yao's attacks. The previous two moves were passive defense. Now that he attacked, the outcome of the battle was instantly decided. Chapter 651. 3 moves. No, to be precise, it was only 1 move. King Qi Yao was killed in 1 move. Such a magnificent feat stunned everyone. The monster race and the human race stared at Tianyang with their mouths agape. It was as if he was not the king of swords they were familiar with, but a monster who had appeared out of nowhere. There was no other reason other than the fact that this move was too terrifying. Cough, 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 cough. King Qi Yao crawled up from the ground. He had already returned to his human form. However, his rugged and resolute face was extremely pale. Tianyang's previous move was too powerful. He had activated his bloodline and reverted to his original form, but it was useless. In front of Tianyang's sword, he was as weak as a piece of paper, unable to withstand a single blow. You are indeed a prodigy of a human race. I, King Qi Yao, am ashamed of my inferiority. King Qi Yao spat out a mouthful of blood and clasped his fists together. This was also because Tianyang had shown mercy. Otherwise, he would not have just been severely injured and spat out a mouthful of blood. It would be a piece of cake for him, King Qi Yao, to be killed by a sword that could even shatter his bloodline power. King Qi Yao? Tianyang raised his eyebrows when he heard that. Your name? King Qi Yao was definitely not his name. No matter how shameless his parents were, they would not name themselves king. However, Tianyang only learned of King Qi Yao's name after the battle ended. Yes, my surname is Yao. I am the young master of the monster race's royal family, the Howling Sky 9-headed hound clan. My full name is Yao Xiaotian. King Qi Yao said. The corner of Tianyang's mouth twitched when he heard that. He did not even know his opponent's name, but he had beaten him half to death. This was a little. However, seeing that Yao Xiaotian did not have any objections, Tianyang did not mind. I have lost this battle. Although I do not know how strong Tang Fengling, the Holy Lady of Nine Heavens Palace, Hua Lingri, the young master of the Scarlet Flame sect, and Monk Siyu of the Western region are, however, I'm certain that those people would not be able to withstand a single blow from Brother King's sword. Yao Xiaotian said seriously. Hearing that, even someone as prideful as Long Taiji nodded. Tianyang's strength was obvious to all. If it weren't for the fact that most people didn't know, he would be the strongest human clan genius in this martial arts conference. At the very least, in the eyes of Long Taiji, King Qi Yao, and Yu Jianshun, not a single genius was stronger than Tianyang. Since I've already lost, I shouldn't dawdle too much. Here are all the azure crystals I have. Take them. Yao Xiaotian shook his head and removed his connection with the interspatial bag regretfully. He handed it to Tianyang. Tianyang reached out his hand and took the interspatial bag. This was a bet that had been set long ago. If he rejected it now, it would only make others think that he was hypocritical. Tens of thousands of azurite crystals, truly powerful. Tianyang released his soul power and roughly scanned the space bag before he exclaimed in admiration. Yao Xiaotian was indeed worthy of being the first on the mortal ranking. Even Tianyang was ashamed of his wealth. He only had a few thousand azurite crystals at most, but King Qi Yao had already surpassed him by 10 times. However, these 10 times more azurite crystals now belonged to him. The rankings on the mortal ranking changed as well. The original number 1, King Qi Yao's name, suddenly disappeared. Following a flash of light, Sword King Tianyang, who had fallen out of the top 100, made a strong comeback. Furthermore, the number of azurite crystals he had crushed the others on the mortal ranking. In other words, even if Tianyang explored a few more secret realms and didn't obtain any azurite crystals, no one else could take his first place. Yu Jianshun and the others smiled happily when they saw that. The demonic beasts were gloomy and their morale plummeted. In the eastern mountain range of the earthly emperor small world. First place, Sword King Tianyang? I knew it. That guy wouldn't lose to King Qi Yao. A beautiful girl in a fiery red dress smiled as she looked at the name on the screen. Her gaze was fixed on the two words Tianyang, as if she was recalling the scene. Saintess, we found a secret realm. Do you want to go in and take a look? Hearing this, Tang Fengling suddenly came back to her senses. Then, she curled her lips and said unhappily, "That's all there is to a secret realm like this. If you found it, so be it. Why do you have to report this to me?" Seeing the holy maiden's extremely displeased expression, the messenger didn't know how he had offended the holy maiden, but he retreated while trembling with fear. As for Tang Fengling, she took another look at the personal ranking before closing it. First place, Sword King Tianyang, almost 100,000 azurite crystals. Huo Lingri stared at the name on the mortal ranking with his mouth agape. He rubbed his eyes hard in disbelief. How many days has it been since we left that damned place? How is this guy so strong? This won't do. Our Scarlet Flame sect doesn't even have 100,000 azurite crystals. Hurry up and collect them. Huo Lingri muttered and closed the mortal ranking. He called out to the Scarlet Flame sect and started searching with all their might. Tianyang's strong performance had deeply hurt his heart. First place, Tianyang. On a prairie, a bald man in Kasaya looked at the mortal ranking and his face darkened. This demon has killed countless Buddhist disciples. He even publicly insulted our Buddha and stole our Buddha's opportunity. He's a ferocious person. Sayu's expression was ugly. Murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Tianyang's outstanding performance had attracted his attention. He even wanted to kill him. However, he couldn't do anything to Tianyang. Tianyang's strength was too strong. The demon that they could only flee in panic had died in Tianyang's hands. Even with the help of Sky, he Gemin Blade Emperor, Tianyang's strength was undeniable. However, Tianyang didn't have a good impression of this group of hypocritical bald donkeys. Senior brother, junior brother, are you willing to help me convert this ferocious person? Sayu turned around and said to the group of Buddhist sect disciples. Sayu said, "This, senior brother, you should do it. Our Buddhist cultivation isn't profound enough. If we go, I'm afraid we'll be killed. Senior brother's Buddhist cultivation is boundless. You can easily suppress this demon. Senior brother can do it alone. We don't want to be burdens." Second junior brother is right. The group of bald donkeys chimed in. Hearing that, Sayu's face took on a ghastly expression. Subsequently, he retrieved a round white jade relic from his interspatial bag. Since we can't kill this person in the earthly emperor's small world, wouldn't it be easy to deal with a lone wolf like him outside? Sayu's expression was extremely gloomy. Then, he laughed sinisterly and sent a message. The powerful white jade Sarira directly penetrated the barrier between the earthly emperor's small world and the Tianshao great world, and sent the message out. Not long after, a message came from the white jade Sarira. Sayu's expression became much better. He let out a sinister laugh and sighed. Then, he put away the Buddhist Sarira. Chapter 652. Tianyang, who was in the northern wilderness, was unaware of the commotion that was happening miles away. However, even if he knew, Tianyang would not be too bothered. Oh yes, the martial arts conference has been going on for more than 3 months. It will end soon. Brother Tianyang, do you have any plans? Yao Xiaotian looked at Tianyang, who seemed to be deep in thought. He smiled and said, I feel like old friends at first sight. Now that we've gotten to know each other through fighting, why don't we form a team? Yao Xiaotian said. He could tell that Tianyang was the leader of Tianyang's group. Whatever Tianyang said, they would do. However, Tianyang and his group did not seem to have any clear goals. Oh, Tianyang raised his eyebrows when he heard that. He had crippled his assistant's left arm and severely injured him. Yao Xiaotian still wanted to form a team with him? How ambitious was that? However, Tianyang knew that Yao Xiaotian had challenged him, dealt with the charming snake, and challenged him to a duel for the sake of the rise of the demon tribe. As the young lord, he had to consider everything. Yao Xiaotian could not use the charming snake, which had the intention to deceive the emperor. That was why he was so decisive. Now that he was severely injured, it was because Tianyang had shown mercy. If it had been someone else, they would have killed him instantly. Yao Xiaotian would not hold a grudge against him. Of course, The most important thing was to have a good relationship with Tianyang. It would be beneficial for the rise of the demon tribe. This person is interesting. The corners of Tianyang's mouth curled into a smile. Tianyang didn't dislike such a person. After all, the world was bustling with activity for profit. Life was all about benefits. Moreover, Yao Xiaoyan's character was not bad, and his strength was not bad either. There was no conflict of interest between them, so Tianyang agreed. We can form a team. However, you asked me about my plans. Do you have your own plans? Tianyang said. Yao Xiaoyan was stunned when he heard that. He was surprised that Tianyang agreed so readily. However, he quickly regained his senses. That's only natural. If I didn't have any plans, I wouldn't have dared to speak so arrogantly. However, there are many people here, and we're in the plains. Our voices will spread far and wide. If others were to hear us, it would be troublesome. Yao Xiaoyan smiled and said, Why don't you rest in my tent? All right. Tianyang did not reveal his heavenly pagoda. After all, Yao Xiaoyan was just a stranger to him. Perhaps Yao Xiaoyan had no ill intentions, but it was better not to show his trump card to others so easily. Of course, there was no harm in revealing it. It was not like Tianyang did not have a trump card similar to the Heavenly Tower. In his palm, the mark of the Great Void Immortal Palace was still glowing. This is our demon race's specialty milk wine. It tastes pretty good. Brother Tianyang, why don't you try it? Yao Xiaoyan handed over a bowl of milky white milk wine and said with a smile. Hearing that, Tianyang chuckled. He took the bowl and placed it on the table. He knocked on the table with his fingers and said, We'll talk about the specialty when we have time. Now, let's get to the point. The martial arts contest will only be held for a year. From what you've said, it seems like it's a big event. Tianyang said. Hearing that, Yao Xiaoyan's smile faded and he became more serious. He waved his hands at the two maidservants beside him. After leaving a few demon race geniuses behind, Yao Xiaoyan opened his mouth slowly. Since Brother Tianyang has said so, I'll get straight to the point. I wonder if Brother Tianyang knows what the real core of the earthly emperor small world is? Yao Xiaoyan asked. Hearing that, Tianyang raised his eyebrows and turned to look at Long Taiji. Long Taiji shrugged, indicating that he did not know either. The East Sea Dragon Palace has been living at the bottom of the East Sea for a long time. The entire sea is their territory. After a long time, they don't care much about land. It's normal that you don't know. Yao Xiaoyan smiled when he saw Tianyang and Long Taiji's reaction. Then, I'll tell you. The Earthly Emperor, Small World, is named after the Earthly Emperor. It's an ancient battlefield from ancient times. That's why there's so many opportunities, but the spiritual chi of heaven and earth is so ordinary. However, the real core of the Earthly Emperor Small World is not these scattered ancient battlefields, relics, and tombs. Instead, it's the great person who created the Earthly Emperor Small World, the inheritance of the Earthly Emperor. Yao Xiaoyan said in a high-pitched voice, The Earthly Emperor, in ancient times, before the red dragon Wuzun, the great person who led the human race to the top. The inheritance of the Earthly Emperor? Upon hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. He had heard of the Earthly Emperor before. If the red dragon Wuzun was the person who led the human race to the top, then the Earthly Emperor was the founder. Perhaps the Earthly Emperor's strength was not as strong as the red dragon Wuzun. However, he was at least at the same level as Tianyang, the origin Emperor Su, before he broke through to the Supreme Realm. Yes, the inheritance of the Earthly Emperor. Yao Xiaoyan's eyes shone with fanaticism. Obviously, he coveted the inheritance of the Earthly Emperor. This information is something that our monstrous clan inadvertently found in an ancient era's book. That's how we learned about it. The Earthly Emperor Small World was originally a small world created by the Earthly Emperor. It was very ordinary. However, the reason why it became the human-demon battlefield in ancient times was because of the inheritance of the Earthly Emperor. In order to fight for the inheritance of the Earthly Emperor, both the demon tribe and the human tribe sent troops into the Earthly Emperor Small World. The whole war was caused by the inheritance of the Earthly Emperor. Later on, the war became more and more intense. This caused the earthly emperor's small world to become an ancient battlefield. This information has been sealed by history. Yao Xiaodian said. Upon hearing this, Tianyang, Long Taiji, Yu Jianshun, and Ling Yuhan's faces turned serious. Beside Yao Xiaotian, the few geniuses from the monster clan were also shocked. Obviously, this was the first time they had heard of this news. The inheritance of the earthly emperor was different from Sanguinati's heaven-severing sword skill, the grave of the sky, tyrant saber sovereign, and the dragon tomb of the dragon emperor. The earthly emperor was the emperor of ancient times. He was equivalent to the Emperor Taishu of the Antiquity Age and the Origin Emperor Shirsu of the era before that. In fact, he was even stronger. If one were to use an example that everyone was familiar with, it would be the Tianji Sword Emperor's inheritance. These words were enough to make the whole continent boil. The inheritance of the earthly emperor was the same. Interesting. The corners of Tianyang's mouth curled up into an interested smile. Perhaps the earthly emperor was not as powerful as Wu Zun, but Tianyang was very interested in the inheritance of the earthly emperor. Those who could become emperors did not cultivate behind closed doors. This was especially true for someone like Tianyang, who had learned the strengths of others and integrated them into his own Tao. It was very important for him to absorb the cultivation of others. Now that the inheritance of the earthly emperor had appeared, he would not miss it. Moreover, it is said that there's a way to reach the heaven-reaching realm in the earthly emperor's small world. Yao Xiaodian said. Upon hearing this, Tianyang's eyes widened. Chapter 653. What? Bang! Tianyang slammed the table and stood up. The table, which was made of hard-cold iron stone and could not be destroyed even if a first-level Sea of Soul Realm cultivator attacked it with all his might, was directly smashed apart by Tianyang's slap. Everyone was shocked. They could sense that Tianyang did not use any true yuan in that attack. He did not even use all of his physical strength. However, this palm strike, which only contained a sliver of physical strength, was able to shatter the table that even a first-level Sea of Souls Realm warrior could not shatter. What kind of strength was that? Immediately, the way everyone looked at Tianyang changed. Even King Qi Yao was the same. They had experienced Tianyang's swordsmanship before. Even if he did not use all of his strength, he could kill King Qi Yao as easily as killing a chicken. Now, even his physical strength was so terrifying. Apart from respect, there was also a trace of fear in everyone's hearts. Fear for the strong. I'm sorry. I lost my composure. Tianyang finally reacted. He smiled embarrassedly and sat back down. However, the table could not be restored. It's fine. The inheritance of earthly emperor is extraordinary. It's normal for Brother Tianyang to be excited. As for the table, it's not worth much. It's fine if it's broken. Yao Xiaodian waved his hand and said with a smile. Tianyang's expression became much better when he heard that. However, even Yao Xiaodian himself did not notice that his tone seemed to be a little weak when he spoke. Even in the ancient books we obtained, there are only a few words about the method to break through to the Heaven Ascension realm. So, I'm sorry, I can't tell you the details, Yao Xiaotian said. Hearing that, Tianyang waved his hand. It's fine. He was born with terminated meridians. Ordinary methods to break through to the Heaven Ascension realm were not suitable for him. Tianyang only realized that now. Speaking of which, if he had not been unlucky enough to encounter the great destruction of civilization, he would have become Wu Zun long ago. As for the inheritance of the earthly sovereign, there was no need to place much importance on it. His path of Wu Zun, the path of martial arts, could only be walked by himself. The predecessors, be it the Crimson Dragon Wu Zun, the Origin Emperor Shirsu, or the earthly sovereign, were at most references to him. In the end, he still had to walk his own path. Yao Xiaodian noticed Tianyang's reaction and was slightly surprised. Tianyang was only a little surprised and interested when he talked about the earthly emperor's inheritance. However, when he talked about the realm above the reaching heaven realm, he seemed to have changed into another person. That agitated look made Yao Xiaotian feel that if he did not speak properly, he would end up just like the table that had been shattered into pieces. Therefore, Yao Xiaotian began to explain in more detail. Even if he had deliberately concealed some of the information, he did not omit anything. It could be said that Yao Xiaotian had revealed everything the monster race knew about the earthly emperor's inheritance. Would the monster race, who had obtained the ancient book, be angered to death? They had gone through so much trouble to obtain the information, but Yao Xiaotian had given it away so easily. However, compared to the information, it seemed that his life was more important. So, the earthly sovereign's small world opens on the day when the cycle of the 3 yuan years changes. That's right. The 3 yuan years are very mysterious. Although there are only 1,800 years between them, the opening of the earthly sovereign's small world rarely coincides with the cycle of the 3 yuan years, Yao Xiaotian said. Yao Xiaotian Dao. 3 yuan years was a calculation method used in ancient times. 600 years was 1 yuan, and 3 yuan was 1,800 years. The earthly emperor's inheritance would only open once every 1,800 years. However, the opening of the earthly sovereign's small world rarely coincided with the 1,800 years. Therefore, although the monster race had received the news a few hundred years ago, the ones who had the chance to obtain the earthly emperor's inheritance were Yao Xiaotian and the others, who would come a few hundred years later. However, after today, Tianyang and the others would have the chance. I see. Then, what should we do after we enter the earthly emperor's inheritance? We will fight for ourselves and take what we need. We will try our best to avoid fighting. Yao Xiaotian seemed to have thought this through. When Tianyang heard this, he smiled and nodded. Yao Xiaotian's words were exactly what he had in mind. Everyone would fight for themselves and take what they needed. In fact, Tianyang didn't even need to avoid fighting. Of course, Yao Xiaotian might have been afraid that Tianyang would make a move, so he set this rule. Then that's it. This is the communication token. When the day comes, we will immediately contact each other using the communication token. Tianyang stood up and smiled. Then, the two of them exchanged communication tokens and walked out of the tent. Yao Xiaotian only heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Tianyang and the others off. Lord King Qi Yao, are we really going to let them go just like that? Shouldn't the fewer people who know about the earthly emperor's inheritance, the better? Deshiong walked up to Yao Xiaotian and asked in confusion. When Yao Xiaotian heard this, he glared at Deshiong. The fewer people who know, the better. That's on the premise that we have the ability to solve it ourselves. How can we possibly take such a big piece of cake with our current strength? Fortunately, Tianyang has a bottom line. Otherwise, I'm afraid he would have killed us once he heard the news. Yao Xiaotian said. Deshiong, who had been scolded, shrank his head and kept quiet. However, Yao Xiaotian's heart was filled with bitterness. If he could take such a big piece of cake as the earthly emperor's inheritance for himself, who would be willing to share it with others? There's only 1 or 2 months left before the year of 3 yuans arrives. Those who want to explore the secret zones, those who want to go into closed-door cultivation, go into closed-door cultivation. Try to make a breakthrough before the earthly emperor's inheritance opens. Yao Xiaotian turned around and said to the rest of the demon clan. Hearing this, all the demons nodded and dispersed. Yao Xiaotian, on the other hand, remained where he was with a gleam in his eyes. The earthly emperor's inheritance. Big brother, do you really believe what King Qi Yao said? Yu Jianshun looked at Tianyang suspiciously as they walked. In his opinion, those who were not of the same race as him were not of the same race. He could not believe what King Qi Yao said at all. Why wouldn't I believe him? Tianyang chuckled. The year of 3 yuans is not something that an ordinary person can say. This fellow's words are clear and logical. If he didn't have the support of ancient books, he wouldn't be able to say so much. Moreover, who told you that Yao Xiaotian is my only source for the earthly emperor's inheritance? Tianyang smiled. Chapter 654. Each and every one of the ancient books gave off an ancient aura. All of these were treasures left behind from the ancient era. Even today, The things recorded on them were secrets that were not passed on to others. Some difficult historical questions could be answered in them. They might have been found earlier or later, but they were all things found in the earthly emperor's small world. In other words, it was very likely that these ancient books recorded information about the earthly emperor's small world and the earthly emperor's inheritance. Holy shit, Big Brother is Big Brother. His eyesight and foresight are truly amazing. Yu Jianshan looked at these familiar ancient books and exploded. He looked at Tianyang with admiration. These ancient books came from the dragon necropolis. They were all obtained by him, but other than a few glances, he didn't touch them. The things recorded in them weren't cultivation methods, martial skills, or secret techniques. To Yu Jianshan, they were useless. But in Tianyang's hands, they were completely different. These things that Yu Jianshan disliked were not only well-maintained in Tianyang's hands, but the words on them were even clearer than when they were first discovered. That was why Yu Jianshan was shocked. He also obtained ancient books, but he threw them away after a few glances. But Tianyang, without knowing their use, kept them well. Now, he took them out and used them. Yu Jianshan admired such foresight. Long Taiji and Ao Ling, the two of them who lived in the Eastern Sea for a long time and didn't pay attention to outside matters, wholeheartedly focused on cultivation, prostrated themselves in admiration. This was 2F King awesome. Even Ling Yuhan had a look of shock on his face. He did not think that the things that this Tianyang had collected in his spare time would actually have such an effect. All right, it's just a few books. It's not like you haven't seen them before. Tianyang smiled, summoned the Heaven Pagoda, and walked in. They didn't care about these ancient books. It was understandable that they were things from the ancient era. They weren't useful for their cultivation. However, Tianyang went to explore the ruins not only for treasures, but also for these things. These things were the main reason he went to explore the ruins. Now that they could be used, Tianyang naturally used them. A group of people sat around a small empty space. On the empty space, there were several ancient books from the ancient era. According to common sense, these ancient books should be extremely fragile. They would even shatter with a touch. But Tianyang had used some unknown method to make these fragile ancient books look like new, not to mention touching them. Even if they were poked with a finger and smashed on the ground, they wouldn't fall apart. Immediately, everyone felt even more admiration for Tianyang. Tianyang, 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 Tianyang. Of all, in fact, Tianyang had only learned these things in order to make a living when he had just entered the martial path in his previous life. This method of repairing ancient books, it was Tianyang's only source of income at the beginning of martial arts. Now that he was strong, he naturally wouldn't forget it. Look, this is the information about the inheritance of the earthly emperor. At this moment, Long Taiji, who was flipping through an ancient book, suddenly jumped up and shouted at the obscure ancient characters on the book. Hearing that, everyone's attention was drawn. The earthly emperor's small world was created by the earthly emperor of the human clan. It contained countless treasures and the inheritance of the earthly emperor. Therefore, countless strong people went there, but they didn't find any treasures. There was an almighty who deduced this number. The inheritance of the earthly emperor was opened once every 3 yuan years. It was only open for a day each time. After that, there was no record of the inheritance of the earthly emperor in this ancient book. But this is enough, Long Taiji said excitedly. So what the demon clan said was true, but we still have to see what's going on. Long Taiji was excited, and so were the others. After all, how could they accept the inheritance left behind by an expert who was equivalent to a great emperor and a pillar of the human clan in ancient times? They weren't Tianyang, the real great emperor. Even if it was just a little bit of information, it was enough to make them excited. Immediately, everyone's mood of casually flipping through the pages disappeared. They directly released their soul strength, searching page after page for information. The efficiency of soul strength was naturally much faster than the speed of the naked eye. Not long after, all the records of the earthly sovereign's inheritance in this ancient book which weighed several tons, were found. Most of them matched what Yao Xiaotian had said. More than 80% of them were found. They couldn't help but wonder how many ancient books Yao Xiaotian had. However, even if they couldn't rule out the possibility that Yao Xiaotian had concealed some of the remaining 20%, there must be some that he didn't know. In ancient times, yuan was used to calculate time. This was because every 600 years, heaven and earth would tremble and there would be a huge energy tide. Such an energy tide was enough to shake the entire world. After the energy tide, the spiritual energy between heaven and earth would increase. Tianyang muttered to himself. He had only heard of yuan, but he didn't know where it came from. Now he knew. 3 yuan years is the most violent and powerful time of the worldly tide. Qinyang's eyes lit up. He knew the intention of the earthly emperor. Only in the 3 yuan years would there be sufficient energy to open his inheritance. At any other time, it would be impossible to find it. Such a plan was really powerful. After a long time, the spiritual energy in Tianshao Great World has stabilized. The energy tide that occurs once every 600 years has also disappeared. That's why it won't be used in the future. However, the earthly emperor's small world was created in ancient times. Since it was created, it has rarely interacted with the outside world. That is to say, in the earthly emperor's small world, there is still a heaven and earth tide that occurs once every 600 years, and a huge heaven and earth tide that occurs once every 3 yuan. Tianyang said with a smile. Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard this. The fragmented information suddenly connected. However, the movement of the heaven and earth tide is not small. I estimate that on that day, the movement of the giant heaven and earth tide will attract all the demonic beasts and cultivators in the martial arts conference, Tianyang muttered. Everyone's expression changed when they heard this. Then, they looked at the ancient books beside them and smiled. So what if everyone knew about it? The information they had was far superior to everyone else's. Chapter 655. Time passed by slowly. It had been more than a month since the day Tianyang and King Qi Yao agreed to fight. Tianyang and the others did not discover any special relics in the past month. They only entered a few casually and returned to their cultivation state. However, although they did not encounter any great opportunities in the past month, their strength had improved greatly. This heaven-slashing sword technique is really full of killing intent. Even the Tao of Azura might not be able to suppress it. The great void sword embryo in Tianyang's hand released rays of blood-red light. A surging and violent killing intent appeared around him. Even Long Taiji and the others stood aside in fear. They did not dare to come closer. After all, Tianyang was currently cultivating the sword Tao that he was most adept at. A month ago, Tianyang was already able to kill King Qi Yao. After a month, his strength had improved greatly. He had also cultivated the heaven-slashing sword technique for such a long time. If he slashed down with his sword, even Long Taiji might not be able to withstand it. However, Sanguinati proved his Tao through killing after all. It's natural for the heaven-slashing sword technique to be full of killing intent. Tianyang chuckled and sheathed his sword. The violent killing intent around him suddenly disappeared. It was as if he had changed into another person. Seeing this, everyone was shocked. Previously, he was still full of killing intent, like a murderous demon king. Now, he had returned to his normal state after sheathing his sword. Although I don't know what this sword technique is called, Sir has definitely cultivated it to the great success stage. Long Taiji exclaimed. He was the strongest, so naturally he had the highest vision. Others could not see through it, but he could. To be able to switch between a murderous demon king and a mortal at any time without being affected. This sword technique must have reached the great success stage. In fact, this was indeed the case. The heaven-cleaving sword art, also known as the 7 deadly sword art, only had 7 deadly moves. Aside from the first move, every move after that was superimposed on the previous move. The further he progressed, the more difficult it became to cultivate. However, Tianyang still managed to cultivate the 5th slash within a month. 5 kill characters stacked on top of each other, each stronger than the last. Even the glorious Sun Spirit King, Jun Tian, might not be able to withstand such power. Based on my calculations, it's almost time for the 3 Eons transition, Tianyang said as he stood with his hands behind his back and looked at the gloomy sky. The earthly sovereign's inheritance would only appear for one day, and on that day, the worldly tide would descend. Just finding the location of the earthly sovereign's inheritance was extremely time-consuming, let alone seizing it. Otherwise, in the history of the opening of the earthly emperor's inheritance so many times, only a few people had entered it. Those few who had entered had not come out, let alone obtain the earthly emperor's inheritance. What are you afraid of? The earthly sovereign's inheritance will definitely be ours. At this time, Long Taiji laughed. In the past month, Tianyang was not the only one who had improved. Their strength had also improved greatly. In the earthly sovereign's small world, there were too many opportunities. They had also obtained many treasures, but they needed time to digest and accumulate. Previously, although they had obtained many treasures, they had not yet digested them, so their strength was not much different from when they had first entered. However, after more than a month, they were different. Ling Yuhan's change was the most obvious. After reaching the Sea of Soul Realm, the power of the 9-nether saint body was gradually released, and the growth of the 9-tailed moon fox martial spirit was even faster. The current Ling Yuhan, in terms of strength, could even compete with Yu Jinshin. Her cultivation had also reached the peak of the 3rd Sea of Soul Realm. Yu Jinshin's growth was a little slower, but he had also broken through to the 6th Sea of Soul Realm. Long Taiji, under Tianyang's guidance, had truly comprehended the Dragon King Divine Fist's 1,000 Dragons God-slaying fist. Although his dragon power was far inferior to Tianyang's, his cultivation was strong enough, and the power he could erupt was extremely terrifying. His cultivation had also improved from the 7th Sea of Soul Realm to the peak of the 7th Sea of Soul Realm. Apart from Ao Ling, who was just a bystander, the strength of Tianyang's group had also improved greatly. In this martial arts competition, there are many hidden dragons and crouching tigers. The individual ranking only represents the strength of some powerful people, but there are also some hidden geniuses who have yet to show their strength. Now that the martial arts competition has entered the middle stage, it will end soon. Some people will not continue to hide, Tianyang said. Hearing this, everyone nodded. There were indeed many super geniuses who were not on the individual ranking. Tang Fengling, Hua Lingri, and Long Taiji beside them were among them. There was also Tianyang from before, who had been unknown all this time. He had only appeared for a few minutes. If not for King Qi Yao's battle with him, no one would have known of his strength. Inferring from this, there were certainly many other hidden geniuses. However, even if we can't beat him, Big Brother will definitely beat him. At this moment, Yu Jinshin laughed mischievously. Everyone nodded, revealing a trace of worship. In their eyes, Tianyang was simply the incarnation of a god. 4th Sea of Soul Realm, killing Demon King. Peak 5th Sea of Soul Realm, insta-killing King Qi Yao. The sword arts he had cultivated before had even caused them to feel waves of palpitations. If someone said that the martial arts competition's champion was not Tianyang, they would probably immediately fall out with that person. All right, it's about to start now. Tianyang shook his head and raised his head to look at the sky. At this moment, the entire earthly emperor small world sky had completely darkened. The cold wind in the northern wilderness had also suddenly changed direction. The entire world had become a lot more oppressive. Countless cultivators in the earthly emperor small world felt that something was amiss and raised their heads. At this moment, the first gust of wind of the heaven and earth tide suddenly blew. Brother Tianyang, the day of the 3 Eons transition has arrived. Yao Xiaotian came to Tianyang's side and looked at the gloomy sky with blazing eyes. In the next moment, boom, the entire world erupted in an instant. It was as if countless volcanoes had erupted at the same time, with magma gushing out. The entire world was covered by crimson energy. The surrounding heaven and earth spiritual chi instantly became much more tyrannical. The earthly emperor small world was trembling, and countless cultivators' expressions changed drastically. The weak ones began to flee, thinking that this was a sign of the end of the world. The strong ones, on the other hand, followed the trajectory of the heaven and earth tide and rushed out. As Yao Xiaotian breathed in the heaven and earth spiritual chi that was comparable to the holy land of martial arts, a trace of intoxication appeared on his face. At this moment, boom, the earth cracked. Boom, mountains collapsed. Boom, the sky was torn apart. Terrifying scenes erupted at this moment and were reflected in the eyes of countless people. This was the heaven and earth tide, the tide that changed the world. Chapter 656. The inheritance of the earthly emperor was activated. Amidst the worldly tide, streaks of dazzling golden light suddenly erupted from the heavens and earth. At the center of the northern wasteland, where the heavenly sun clan and the demon clan were standing, a huge palace suddenly flew out. That is, Yao Xiaoyan's eyes were burning as he looked at the huge golden palace in the sky. His eyes were burning with passion. Although he did not know the origin of the golden palace, his instincts told him that it was the palace of the earthly emperor's inheritance. Boys, go! Yao Xiaotian no longer cared about Tianyang, who was beside him. With a roar, he led the fiend race and charged forward. Follow King Qi Yao. The demons seemed to have lost their minds and charged forward. Tianyang, who was about to remind them, shut his mouth. He wanted to say that the wind of the heaven and earth tide was very strong. However, this guy should know. Let's not waste any time. Let's go. Tianyang smiled and summoned the heavenly pagoda. He walked in and flew toward the golden palace. The astral wind of the heaven and earth tide was extremely sharp. Even if it was just a little bit, it was enough to cause a third-level Dao fire realm expert to bleed to death. However, the wind was nothing in front of the array that Tianyang had set up to counter the heaven and earth tide. Bang, 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 bang. The wind that was as sharp as knives hit the walls of the heavenly pagoda, but did not move it at all. The heavenly pagoda continued to fly steadily toward the golden palace. Dazzling rays of light surged out of the heavenly tower, easily blocking the astral winds. Sitting inside, Tianyang and the others did not feel the slightest bit of cold. Instead, they felt very comfortable. F***CK? The ancient books did not say that there would be such a huge commotion. King Qi Yao, who was not far away from the heavenly pagoda, was speechless as he resisted the wind of the heaven and earth tide. The closer they got to the golden palace, the stronger the wind became. Although these gales were nothing to their fleshly bodies, which were all at the sea of soul realm, it still greatly hindered their progress. Damn it, won't someone beat us to it? King Qi Yao gritted his teeth and was just about to utilize his demonic energy to forcefully break through the barrier before him, when an enormous object suddenly flew over. What is it? King Crimson Demon, Yao Xiaotian, was shocked and hurriedly turned around to look. He saw an enormous pagoda that he had never seen before tearing through space and rushing towards the enormous golden palace at extreme speed. Yao Xiaotian's expression changed drastically when he saw that. What is this? Why are you here? Yao Xiaotian was bewildered. Then he started to panic. Although he had a lot of information, he was not sure how much of an advantage he would have if someone else beat him to it. King Qi Yao was determined to obtain the earthly emperor's inheritance and the treasures within it. Yao Xiaotian's heart skipped a beat. He immediately channeled his true energy and rushed over. Boss, wait for us. The astral winds are getting stronger and stronger. We can't hold on any longer. Boss, help. Just as Yao Xiaotian was about to charge forward, a series of screams came from behind him. Yao Xiaotian could not help but stop in his tracks when he heard that. He had no choice. They were his underlings. If he ignored them, he would definitely offend the demonic forces behind them. If he offended all these forces, he would no longer be the king of monsters. With so many forces working together, It would be a piece of cake for them to kill King Chi Yao. I have no choice. I can only take this out, Yao Xiaotian said painfully. Then, he immediately took out a jade-green shield from his interspatial bag. In the next moment, the shield was injected with true energy and demonic energy. It instantly expanded and turned into a gigantic circular barrier that surrounded everyone inside. This is the turquoise water python's snake scale shield. That's a one-time use item. Boss is indeed our boss. He's willing to take this out for us. The demonic beast exclaimed in shock when they were surrounded by the jade-green circular barrier. They could no longer feel any astral winds. The turquoise water python was not an ordinary demonic beast. It could be said that it was the ancestor of the turquoise water python clan, one of the most powerful demonic beasts. Although the source of the turquoise water python scale shield was not very powerful, it was only at the 5th level of the turquoise water python clan. It was only at the 5th level of the Sea of Souls realm. However, its defensive power was extremely shocking. It was strong enough to block the attacks of Spirit King Glorious Sun, Jun Tian, and Honorable Ironbone. Unfortunately, it was a one-time use item. Yao Xiaotian's lips twitched when he heard that. If he did not want to catch up with them as soon as possible, he would not have taken out such a precious one-time use item. Such a treasure was too precious to be used as a life-saving item. All right, let's stop talking nonsense. The most important thing now is to catch up with that tower. We're the only ones who can obtain the earthly emperor's inheritance, Yao Xiaotian said. The demonic beasts nodded when they heard that. They roared and unleashed their majestic true energy as they charged toward the Golden Palace. Master, what's wrong with Yao Xiaotian and the others? Why are they speeding up all of a sudden? At this moment, Ling Yuhan, who was in the Heaven Tower, asked curiously as she looked at Yao Xiaotian and the others who were charging toward them with their shields up as if they were on steroids. They had scouted the area earlier and found out that they were the only 2 teams within 1,000 miles. Since they would arrive early, what difference would it make if they arrived a few seconds earlier? This was the earthly emperor's inheritance, not a 100-meter race. Who knows? Tianyang shrugged and smiled meaningfully. Yao Xiaotian was really suspicious. He had not done anything. All he did was let the Heaven Tower overtake him. Yet, Yao Xiaotian had such a huge reaction. He wondered if Yao Xiaotian would still abide by the rules that they had agreed on before entering the earthly emperor's inheritance. However, judging from the current situation, the more suspicious Yao Xiaotian was, the more advantageous it would be for Tianyang. After all, if one was suspicious of others, one would naturally trust one's own people more. The gale here seems to have weakened a lot. At this moment, Tianyang raised his eyebrows as he sensed the changes in his surroundings. He then chuckled. I see. The closer they got to the Golden Palace, the more terrifying the gale was. The strongest gale could even blow a first-level Sea of Soul Realm cultivator to death. However, there was a buffer layer around the Golden Palace. After passing through the buffer layer, the gale that the Heaven Tower was hit by was much weaker. We're here. Tianyang chuckled and stepped out of the Heaven Tower. He blew away the gale that was blowing toward him, but it had weakened a lot. Chapter 657. Creek. Tianyang stepped on the ground in front of the huge Golden Palace. Instantly, a crisp sound was heard. Tianyang raised his eyebrows. He felt that he had stepped on something protruding out. Just as he was about to look down, he suddenly heard Long Taiji's strange cry. F***CK. As for the others, they turned their heads and looked at the thing under Tianyang's feet in horror. They saw that under Tianyang's feet, there was a white bone that was about 10 feet long. Tianyang stepped on it and broke it into 2. Why are there bones here? Tianyang was a little shocked. He looked at the white bone under his feet and then looked up. He saw that in front of the huge Golden Palace, there were all kinds of white bones lying on the ground that seemed to be splendid. Some of the white bones had already turned yellow and withered. The spiritual energy in them had been depleted. It was obvious that a long time had passed. Some of the white bones were still clean and shiny. The spiritual energy was still there. However, they were still just white bones. There was no trace of life. This Ling Yuhan was shocked. Although she was not to the extent of being frightened, the scene of this vast sea of bones also gave her an extremely great shock. What happened here? This bone is probably from 1 to 2,000 years ago. It's estimated that it was from 1,800 years ago. However, looking at this aura, it was at least the strength of a spiritual king. The spirit kings have all died here. Tianyang squatted down and looked at the white bone that he had stepped on. After he stretched out his hand to examine it, he suddenly understood. The owner of this white bone had died 1,800 years ago. This skeleton, which was about 10 feet long, belonged to a huge demonic beast. It was estimated that it was a demonic beast that was native to the earthly Emperor Small World. Its strength was not weak, and it sat on the right time and place. However, it still died here. There was still a distance of 1,000 meters from the entrance of the huge golden palace. Interesting. Tianyang stood up. He was too lazy to care about the eerie white bones under his feet and walked forward. The owners of these skeletons were not weak, but they had still died here. Tianyang's interest was piqued. Brother Tianyang, so you've already arrived? At this moment, Yao Xiaotian and the others finally arrived. They removed the aqua-viridescent flower python scale shield and looked at Tianyang. I wonder if Brother Tianyang has seen a huge tower flying by. Hearing this, Tianyang chuckled. Even after reaching the Golden Hall, this guy still couldn't forget about it. I saw it, but it seems to have flown in, Tianyang said with a smile. Everyone looked at him strangely when they heard his words. Yao Xiaotian nodded his head. It actually flew in? Looks like that tower doesn't belong to us outsiders. I reckon it's a treasure from the earthly sovereign's legacy. Yao Xiaotian analyzed seriously. Tianyang's lips twitched when he heard Yao Xiaotian's words. He turned his head and thought, this fellow is too easy to fool. Boss, look at your feet. At this moment, a panicked roar came from beside Yao Xiaotian. Yao Xiaotian frowned when he heard it. He was about to reprimand the person when he saw what was beneath his feet. It was a pile of white bones. In front of him, a sea of bones. F*CK. Yao Xiaotian was shocked. Why would there be such a thing in the earthly sovereign's legacy? The ancient books that he obtained did not mention anything about it. I don't know where this thing came from. However, since they all died here, it's better to be careful. Tianyang said. Then, he stepped forward slowly and released his soul power. The earthly sovereign's strength was similar to his. Naturally, his soul power was not stronger than Tianyang's. No matter how many ambushes the earthly sovereign had set up, Tianyang was confident that he could find and break through them. However, Yao Xiaotian and the others were in a much worse state. One of them wanted to fly up and hide from the thing on the ground. However, there was a flight restriction array in the Golden Hall. Even if they jumped more than 10 feet into the air, they would be pressed back down, let alone fly. Therefore, Tianyang and the others walked leisurely at the front, while the demons behind them walked with trepidation. They purposely chose the safer path without any corpses. They did not even dare to walk on the path that Tianyang and the others had walked on. That was because Tianyang and the others were walking on corpses. Brother Tianyang, are you sure you don't want to take a look? There are too many corpses here. If there is any danger, we might not be able to fend them off, Yao Xiaotian said in a trembling voice. Yao Xiaotian said in a trembling voice. If it wasn't for his strong demon sense, he would have discovered the threat and successfully avoided it. Otherwise, he and his men would have fallen into the trap. However, Tianyang and the others walked calmly. Some of them were even jumping around. Yao Xiaotian's heart skipped a beat when he saw that. If anything happened to them, they would be done for. It's all right. Tianyang chuckled and shook his head. 1,000 meters was not long. No matter how careful Tianyang and the others were, they would be able to cross it in a minute or two. The demons were much slower. They were still trembling in fear when they were 500 meters away. Forget it. Tianyang shook his head. He could not be bothered to remind them. After all, they might not listen to him even if he did. Master, there's a corpse here. At this moment, Ling Yuhan let out a cry of surprise. She discovered the skeleton that had fallen in front of the door of the huge golden palace. Even though it was dead, it was still standing with its back straight. As the corpse was standing, Tianyang did not notice it. It was only now that he realized that the corpse belonged to a real corpse. Only a small piece of blood-colored robe was left on the corpse's body. The rest had been blown away by the wind. The corpse was very tall, about 9 meters. Its back was straight, and the lines of its skull were chiseled. It looked very handsome. Even though it was just a skeleton without any flesh or blood, Heavenly Sun could still simulate the appearance of the person before him. 10,000 years ago, there's still so much spiritual qi. Tianyang's soul power spread out, revealing the information of the skeleton in front of him. 10,000 years ago was not a big deal. There are many corpses from 10,000 years ago. However, the spiritual qi in the corpse that had yet to dissipate shocked Tianyang. It's at least LV5 of the heavenly completion realm. Tianyang gulped and exclaimed. Everyone's eyes widened when they heard that. They were shocked. LV5 of the heavenly completion realm. Wouldn't that make it an emperor? 10,000 years later, martial arts had declined. The standards used to determine an emperor were no longer applicable. Nowadays, LV5 of the heavenly completion realm was enough for an emperor. A ruler had actually died here. Even a heavenly completion realm powerhouse died here. Ling Yuhan said in disbelief. Tianyang was about to speak when an unforeseen event occurred. Billowing blood-colored aura was released from a corpse. A face seemed to appear on the skull. A feminine and handsome man with a murderous aura suddenly appeared. A crazy killing intent flashed in the corpse's eyes. In the next moment, the surrounding white bones suddenly flew up, turning into a bone sword and landing in the corpse's hand. Kill! The corpse roared. In the next moment, the sword slashed out. Chapter 658. Kill. A huge kill word was formed in an instant. It rushed toward Tianyang at lightning speed. Tianyang's expression changed slightly. Then he smiled. Light flashed in his hand, and in less than a second, the great void sword embryo appeared in his hand. 7 kills technique, first kill. Tianyang roared, and his killing intent exploded. Massacre territory, open. The boundless killing intent almost turned everything in the surroundings into a boundless purgatory. In just a short moment, everyone felt the pressure of life. Long Taiji's eyes widened. He could not wrap his head around why Baigu would suddenly attack. Why was Tianyang able to react in an instant and use the sword technique that he had been practicing for more than a month? Why was Baigu also using the sword technique? Boom! A terrifying explosion erupted from where the two of them were clashing. Billows of air surged out, and countless white bones flew around. Baigu's feminine face was still on his body. He was releasing his killing intent. Looking at the kill word that could not do anything to Tianyang, Baigu roared again. Kill. 7 kills technique, second kill. Seeing this, everyone was sure that Baigu was using the 7 kills technique that Tianyang had been practicing for more than a month. 7 kills technique, second kill. At this moment, Tianyang laughed loudly. The great void sword embryo in his hand emitted countless crimson rays that turned into the word kill. It charged toward Baigu's second kill. Boom! An explosion even more terrifying than before was heard. This time, all the white bones within 100 feet were turned into bone dust. Under the influence of the airwaves, they turned into a bone powder storm that engulfed the entire area. The sky was filled with white bones. When Long Taiji and the rest saw the sea of bones, they were only slightly surprised. However, when the sky was filled with bone powder and a white bone storm was formed with them as the center, everyone felt chills down their spines. This was too terrifying. Yao Xiaotian and the rest were dumbfounded. What was going on? Why did the skeleton that had been dead for thousands of years suddenly come back to life? Why would Tianyang fight with him? Most importantly, why would the thousands of bones turn into a huge kill character after they were all crushed? The word kill was an ancient word from 10,000 years ago. It was slightly different from the word kill in Tianshao continent. However, the word kill that was formed from the eerie white bones erupted with an even more terrifying killing intent than before. Such killing intent was practically on the verge of slaughtering all the gods and Buddhas in the world and annihilating all the living beings in the world. There wasn't the slightest bit of rationality within it, and there was only the thought of slaughter. F***CK. Why is this Sanguinati still here after being dead for 10,000 years? When Tianyang saw this, he immediately cursed. He could also tell that Sanguinati had completely lost his mind before he died. After his death, he naturally became even crazier. Kill! The Blood Sword Emperor, who had already turned into a skeleton, roared again. His bone sword slashed out countless times, drawing the huge white bone kill character in the sky. One after the other, they attacked the heavenly sun. 7 killing sword skill, 4th killing move, 5th killing move. When Tianyang saw this, he couldn't continue to hide his strength. Boundless blood-red light erupted from the great void sword embryo. The level of the massacre territory instantly rose to a whole new level. The blood-red light filled the sky, and there seemed to be a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood beneath his feet. Tianyang's eyes suddenly turned blood-red. He was like a demonic god in a sea of blood. Instantly, everyone was shocked. They were all stunned. Even Yao Xiaotian and the rest, who were far away, didn't dare to move an inch. There was no other reason. This killing intent was simply too terrifying. It was so terrifying that it seemed that if they had the slightest thought, the killing intent would follow the traces and kill them, crushing their souls. You're already dead. How dare you be presumptuous in front of me? Tianyang's tone was indifferent. The great void sword embryo in his hand rose, and in this blood-red world, a ray of black light burst out. Immediately after, Tianyang slashed out with his sword. Boom! The mountain of corpses, the sea of blood, the kill character, and the endless sea of bones instantly turned into dust. Sanguinati's face revealed a trace of horror. He was shocked by this powerful force and recovered a trace of clarity. Emperor, Sanguinati said in shock. In the next moment, an unparalleled emperor's aura erupted. This soul was instantly crippled, and it no longer had any strength to resist. Everything in the surroundings was completely turned into nothingness by this sword. As his voice gradually faded, the massacre territory beneath Tianyang's feet also gradually dissipated. Tianyang's blood-red eyes also returned to their original state. However, Tianyang's face was still indifferent. That was the indifference that belonged to an emperor. As an emperor, he was above heaven and earth. Even the heavenly Tao of this Tianshao great world could not compete with him. If it were not for the sudden collapse of civilization, Tianyang would have broken the restrictions of the heavenly Tao and turned into Wu Zun to go to another world. However, Tianyang's state did not last long before he recovered. As expected, as my strength increases, I can use more soul power. I just used the great emperor's power once, and there was no backlash. Tianyang clenched his fists, and the corners of his mouth curved into a smile. Being able to use the great emperor's power will undoubtedly gave him the strongest trump card besides Shuntian Wuzuan's power. When I reach the 7th level of Sea of Soul Realm, I can start cultivating the peerless heaven-class martial skill from Shuntian Wuzuan, 10,000 Swords Return to Origin. At that time, even if I only have Jin Yuan, I can fight against a half-step Heaven Ascension Realm expert. Tianyang smiled faintly and withdrew his mind. Right now, the most important thing was still the Sanguinati in front of him, who had been dead for many years and suddenly came back to life and gave him a fright. Emperor, Sanguinati's remnant soul was heavily injured, but it was also much clearer. Now he just stared blankly at Tianyang, repeating a word. Hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. This guy was really stupid. Tianyang suddenly felt a headache. 10,000 years ago, although they did not have much of a relationship, they were both Heaven Ascension Realm sword cultivators, and their relationship was a little better than strangers. Moreover, now, there were still places where he could use Sanguinati. If Sanguinati was so stupid, it would be difficult for him. Stupid, Tianyang muttered. Hearing this, Sanguinati reacted, and the crazed look in his eyes disappeared. Then, he used his soul power to form a shield. Inside the shield, there was only Tianyang and Sanguinati. Tianyang's lips curved into a smile. He was not afraid of this guy's little tricks. Previously, Tianyang could let him live, and now, he could also take his life. At this time, Sanguinati glanced at Tianyang, and his face suddenly changed, kneeling on one knee. Chapter 659. Sanguinati greets Lord Tianji, Sword Emperor. Sanguinati shouted respectfully. Then, he lowered his head, appearing extremely sincere. Seeing this, Tianyang was stunned for a moment. Then, he reacted and said calmly, "All right, you're not you now, and I'm not me. What's the use of being so particular? Get up," Tianyang said. Sanguinati didn't understand what Tianyang meant, but he quickly stood up. Seeing Sanguinati's action, Tianyang let out a long sigh as he thought back to 10,000 years ago. 10,000 years ago, there were too many reaching heaven state experts to mention. Because of their different strengths, they were divided into many levels. Great Emperor, Emperor, Quasi-Emperor, and ordinary reaching heaven state experts. Tianyang was undoubtedly the strongest among the great emperors, standing at the top of the Tianshao Great World Pyramid. Sanguinati, on the other hand, was at the bottom of the emperors. In addition, he and Tianyang both used swords. Although Sanguinati had never seen Tianyang before, he still had to bow respectfully when he saw Sword Saint Zhou Xing. When he saw Tianyang, he naturally knelt on one knee. After all, for a reaching heaven state expert at the bottom of the emperors, whether it was Sword Saint Zhou Xing, who had the strength of a great emperor but didn't have the title of great emperor, or Tianyang, there were both existences that he couldn't afford to offend. TSK, forget it. It's already 10,000 years later. Tianyang pursed his lips and didn't dwell on it anymore. It wasn't as if he hadn't met an old friend from 10,000 years ago. Back then, Sword Saint Zhou Xing was stronger than Sanguinati in terms of cultivation, strength, and connections. Tianyang naturally wouldn't care so much about Sanguinati. By the way, before I met you, not only did you become a skeleton, but you were also like a madman. What happened? Tianyang suddenly raised his eyebrows and said, before Sanguinati was defeated by him, he was a complete and utter murderous maniac. He would kill anyone he saw. Every time he attacked, he would use his most powerful sword move. If not for Tianyang's quick reflexes and fierce attacks, he would have been injured by Sanguinati. One had to know that Sanguinati had proven his Tao by killing, not by being killed. He was clearly a cultivator of the Tao of slaughter. How could he be controlled by the Tao of slaughter? Hearing this, Sanguinati's face became much paler, as if he had thought of something extremely terrifying. Drops of cold sweat appeared on his forehead, and his originally feminine and handsome face became incomparably pale. Seeing this, Tianyang's heart skipped a beat. To prove his Tao by killing, Sanguinati's strength might not be very strong, but his state of mind cultivation must be very strong. After all, to be able to prove his Tao by killing, not be addicted to killing, and transform into a killing machine, and successfully become an emperor of a generation, such a person, no matter what, had to be a person with an extremely strong will. But even such a person was scared to this extent. What was in the inheritance of the earthly emperor? What is in the inheritance of the earthly emperor that even you are scared to this extent? Tianyang laughed. This earthly emperor was at most at the same level as him. Now, he had obtained various opportunities, and his soul power was stronger than in his previous life. If he released his soul power, not to mention a Sanguinati, even if the earthly emperor's corpse came back to life, he could still kill him. Therefore, he was somewhat disapproving of Sanguinati's performance. In the inheritance of the earthly emperor, there is the corpse of the demon emperor. Sanguinati trembled a few times, then said in a hoarse voice, forcefully suppressing his fear. Hearing this, Tianyang's expression changed abruptly. Outside, Yao Xiaotian and the others had finally crossed the last 500 meters and arrived at the entrance of the earthly emperor palace. Yao Xiaotian asked curiously when he saw Tianyang, who had suddenly stopped moving. What happened to brother Tianyang? Hearing this, the others shrugged. They did not know what was going on, but they were not too worried. Previously, when Tianyang attacked, he could easily kill Gumu with a light slash of his sword. It was obvious that he had used all his strength to execute the White Bones kill word. Now, even if Gumu wanted to rebel, he would not be able to defeat Tianyang. Perhaps, he would even become Tianyang's nutrients. Poof! At this moment, a dull sound was heard, as if something had broken. In the next moment, Tianyang's eyes regained their clarity. However, after recovering, Tianyang's expression was extremely ugly. Master, what's wrong? Seeing this, Ling Yuhan walked over and asked with concern. Tianyang shook his head and looked at Sanguinati, who was now only a skeleton, in front of him. His expression was extremely ugly. The Demon Emperor's corpse. The Demon Emperor was the highest commander sent by the extraterrestrial demons when they invaded the parallel universe. He was much more powerful than the Demon King. Heaven Continent had been invaded by the extraterrestrial demons 3 times in the Ancient Era, the Antiquity Age, and 10,000 years ago. In the Great War, 10,000 years ago, Tianyang was the main character. Naturally, he had clashed with the Demon Emperor a few times. These few times, even though he was almost at the peak of the Way of the Sword, he did not gain any advantage over the Demon Emperor. In fact, he was even slightly suppressed by the Demon Emperor. He had thought that after he killed the Demon Emperor with all his strength, there would be no more Demon Emperors in this world. However, Sanguinati had told him that the Demon Emperor's corpse was here. The reason why he had gone crazy was because he had been infected by the demon chi around the Demon Emperor's corpse. The earthly emperor did not completely destroy the Demon Emperor. He left a corpse behind. Is he waiting for the Demon Emperor to come back to life? Tianyang's expression was extremely ugly. If Sanguinati was not wrong, the Demon Emperor's corpse was still surrounded by demon chi, even though it had been dead for hundreds of millions of years. If such a Demon Emperor's corpse fell into the hands of an evil person, it might cause a new disaster. At that time, the earthly emperor would really die 1,000 times. There's a little trouble to solve. King Xiao, why don't we part ways here? Tianyang turned his head and said to Yao Xiaotian, the fewer people who knew about the Demon Emperor's corpse, the better. Okay. Yao Xiaotian was a little confused, but he could not refute. He nodded and led the monsters in. Although he wanted to go through a few stages with Tianyang before parting ways, Tianyang did not agree to it. Tianyang would definitely not go with them. Although he did not know what had happened, Yao Xiaotian did as he was told. After Yao Xiaotian and the others left, only Tianyang and his men were left at the entrance. Master, what happened? Ling Yuhan asked curiously when she saw Tianyang's serious expression. Tianyang shook his head. The Demon Emperor's corpse had not been confirmed yet. What if Sanguinati mistook the stronger Demon King's corpse for the Demon Emperor's corpse? If he said it out loud before it was confirmed, it would only cause chaos among the troops. Don't ask. Now, Sanguinati, come out and lead the way. Tianyang waved his hand. Then, he looked at the door of the earthly emperor's palace that was opened by Yao Xiaotian and the others. Hearing that, the Sanguinati, who had only left a skeleton, ran up to Yao Xiaotian. Yes, sir, what are your orders? P.S. End of 20 chapters. Please subscribe. Chapter 660. Inside an enormous, majestic, and resplendent hall. Bang! A terrifying loud sound was heard, and a sword light instantly rushed out on the road that everyone was walking on. Sanguinati, kill it. Yes. In the next moment, a bone sword slashed out an astonishing sword chi, enveloping that sword light within. Berserk killing intent was released, and this sword light instantly turned into the energy of heaven and earth, being forcibly shattered. Subsequently, everyone walked a few more steps, and the wall beside them suddenly split open, and a huge beast with a sinister appearance rushed out. Roar! 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 The huge beast was like a dragon and a tiger, looking extremely terrifying. Two huge fangs were exposed in the air, and saliva dripped down from the fangs. The most shocking thing was that this huge beast actually emitted a powerful aura comparable to the 5th level of sea of Soul Realm. Roar! Roar, roar, roar! A terrifying roar rang out, and the sound waves were like thunder, violently surging out in all directions, striking the walls and bouncing back, causing the sound to be even more terrifying. If it were a 1st level sea of Soul Realm here instead, this roar would have already shaken their brains to the point that they would have lost the ability to move and be at the mercy of others. And at this moment, an indifferent voice rang out. Sanguinati, insta-kill him. Yes. Sky-severing sword arts, first strike. A loud roar rang out, and in the next moment, a huge kill word instantly flew out. Not only did it tear the surging sound waves into pieces, it even pierced through the huge beast's heart in one fell swoop. In an instant, it was killed. Seeing this, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air one after another, revealing shock on their faces. They had thought that Sanguinati was easily defeated by Tianyang before, and that his strength was definitely not that great. Although he might have been a Heaven Ascension realm expert when he was alive, after being dead for so many years, his strength had probably been greatly reduced. And the result? Now that Sanguinati had acted several times, it had thoroughly proven his strength. The sword light that was enough to insta-kill a Spirit King was easily shattered. That huge beast's offensive and defensive abilities both far surpassed the peak of the 5th level of Sea of Soul Realm. However, in the hands of Sanguinati, it was still torn into pieces and died an unnatural death. As for the other few times, all of them were extremely powerful opponents. It was as if Tianyang deliberately wanted to use these opponents to test Sanguinati's strength. The facts prove that Sanguinati's strength was indeed incomparably terrifying. Although he definitely didn't have the strength of reaching Heaven Realm, he was definitely stronger than ordinary 9th level Sea of Soul Realm warriors. What kind of concept was that? In other words, Venerable Iron Bone, who had forced Tianyang into a corner and had to rely on Shuntian Wuzuan's power to kill him, could not last more than a few moves in front of Sanguinati. Everyone finally understood that Sanguinati was killed by Tianyang not because Sanguinati was weak, but because Tianyang was too strong. All right, Sanguinati, you can stop now. Seeing Sanguinati instantly kill this huge beast, Tianyang nodded in satisfaction. Sanguinati had died 10,000 years ago, yet he still had such strength. It was somewhat unexpected. However, thinking of Sanguinati's strength and the fact that not much of his internal spiritual chi had been lost, it was possible for him to erupt with reaching Heaven Realm battle prowess if his soul wasn't heavily injured. A mere 9th level Sea of Soul Realm was naturally a piece of cake. Yes, Sanguinati was still respectful. Although his strength had been proven, in front of Tianyang, he still didn't dare to be the slightest bit presumptuous. If Tianyang hadn't given him a medicinal pill to recover soul power, it would have been pretty good for him to have Yu Jinshin strength. If Tianyang hadn't heavily injured him, he would probably still be a killing maniac. Now, although only a skeleton was left, he could still be considered alive. Sanguinati was already extremely satisfied. Towards Tianyang, on top of his original reverence, he naturally felt grateful. However, is there something wrong with this earthly emperor's head, or is it the ancient times? Even the inheritance has a mechanism every 3 steps, a huge beast every 10 steps. If it were someone else, I wonder how many would have died. Tianyang shook his head. Although most of these huge beasts and mechanisms were purposely lured by Tianyang, if an ordinary person didn't know, they would definitely fall into a few traps. At that time, it would be completely over. However, this path is full of mechanisms. I presume that the number of people who died is not small. Why is this path still so clean, without a single trace of blood? Tianyang muttered to himself. This matter was somewhat fishy. However, the others had already walked ahead. Only now did Tianyang react and follow. Although it was fishy, Tianyang wasn't afraid. Along with the recovery of his strength, his confidence had naturally recovered as well. The arrogance of an emperor had never vanished. "My lord, I seem to have found a trace of something wrong." After about 10 minutes of advancing, Sanguinati suddenly stopped. The soul fire in his eye sockets shone with a serious light. Everyone stopped when they heard this, and they looked at the blood-sword emperor. Tianyang raised his head. "I have attained my Tao through killing. I am most sensitive to killing and blood. From the previous battle, I can see that those huge beasts and mechanisms have traces of blood on them. If there is blood, then there must be blood left. However, after walking for so long, have we seen a drop of blood?" Sanguinati said seriously. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed. Indeed, after walking for so long, although they had encountered many battles, they had not seen a drop of blood, other than the blood that flowed out from the huge beasts. Although the others had traces of blood, there were no drops of blood. Furthermore, Sanguinati said slowly, "I noticed that after walking for 10 minutes, our speed wasn't slow. 10 minutes is enough to walk tens of thousands of meters. However, we are still walking on this path. Did you notice that this is the same place where I killed the huge beasts?" Sanguinati said. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed drastically. They hurriedly turned their heads and looked around. Their expressions gradually turned ugly. Indeed, other than the lack of blood under their feet, the other places, no matter how they looked at it, were the places where the huge beasts had appeared. They also clearly remembered that when Sanguinati killed the huge beasts with a single slash, blood spurted out and dyed the entire ground red. Now it was completely clean. "This is ghostly wall," Ao Ling said with a pale face. Hearing this, Long Taiji's expression changed slightly. If it was ghostly wall, then this matter would be serious. "It's not ghostly wall. It's just a powerful force that caused the space to distort." At this moment, Tianyang smiled and stepped forward. Looking at Sanguinati with approval, Tianyang smiled and said, "It seems that although you have been dead for 10,000 years, your skills have not fallen behind." Hearing this, Sanguinati nodded. "I dare not forget. Then, I will continue. I observed the flow of the blood and found that all the blood is gathered in one place," Sanguinati said. In the next moment, he slashed out with his sword. Boom! The wall beside them instantly exploded. It revealed the deep and silent darkness inside. In the middle of the darkness, a beautiful blood lotus swayed and bloomed. Absorb the blood to grow. Chapter 661. 10,000-year blood demon lotus. Sanguinati exclaimed. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. What was a 10,000-year blood demon lotus? However, after hearing this name, Tianyang's face showed a rare trace of seriousness. The blood demon lotus is a ferocious object from ancient times. It absorbs blood to promote the growth of its cultivation. As it grows older, the power of the blood demon lotus will become stronger. After 1,000 years, it can even kill living creatures and absorb blood for its own use. 10,000-year blood demon lotus is even more terrifying. Even if it is a few hundred meters away, it can still attack, Tianyang explained. Hearing this, Long Taiji's mouth twitched and his face became extremely ugly. Then the distance from here to the 10,000-year blood demon lotus seems to be less than 1,000 meters. Boom! A thick vine suddenly stretched out from the blood-red blood demon lotus. Like a long whip, it attacked Tianyang fiercely. Sanguinati's face changed greatly, and he suddenly slashed out with the bone sword in his hand. Clang! A sound of metal clashing was heard. Sanguinati's body was directly pushed back a few feet. The long whip-like vine, which was as thick as a water tank, attacked again. I estimate that it is more than 10,000 years old. Tianyang's mouth twitched slightly. Looking at the vines that covered the sky and the sun, he led everyone to retreat quickly. Although the 10,000-year blood demon lotus had lived for more than 1,000,000 years, according to Tianyang's calculation, the time that it could really cultivate by absorbing blood was at most 10,000 years. However, looking at the strength of the 10,000-year blood demon lotus, it was obviously more than that. It is at least 30,000 years old. The Blood Sword Emperor said. A long crack had appeared on the bone sword in his hand from the collision just now. His soul flame was also flickering unstably. There was a 10,000-year blood demon lotus in the inheritance of the earthly emperor. What was the earthly emperor trying to do? Sir, be careful. Just as Sanguinati was lost in thought, the vine swept out and swept towards the Tianyang group. At the same time, another vine rushed out from the roots of the 10,000-year blood demon lotus. The two vines, one in front and one behind, almost sealed off all of Tianyang's escape routes. Hee, it's just a plant. You want to fight with me? At this time, Tianyang looked at the two vines that wanted to kill him and smiled indifferently. He stretched out his hand, and the heavenly flame of destruction burned fiercely on his palm. Then, the heavenly flame of annihilation instantly expanded into a terrifying flame that illuminated the world and enveloped the two vines. Sizzle. The vines were almost torn apart by the destructive heavenly fire. Even Sanguinati's bone sword could not shake the tough outer skin. Flames of the destructive heavenly fire burned and covered the entire vines in the blink of an eye. Fire restrains wood. This was the truth of heaven and earth. Although the formation process of the 10,000-year blood demon lotus is extremely evil and terrifying, if I can pick it and refine it, even my current divine dragon body can make great progress. Tianyang's eyes were shining as he controlled the destructive heavenly fire to repel the vines. His thoughts were running fast. He was actually thinking about the 10,000-year blood demon lotus. If it were someone else, they would have taken advantage of the opportunity to escape and go deep into the inheritance of the earthly emperor to obtain other opportunities in the inheritance. However, for Tianyang, the current situation was very different. Other opportunities? What opportunities could be compared with the 10,000-year blood demon lotus in front of him? The 10,000-year blood demon lotus was not only powerful. If it was refined and consumed, not only could it strengthen the physical strength, but it could also purify the vital essence. It would be more likely to enter the heavenly arrival realm. Moreover, the 10,000-year blood demon lotus was one of the main ingredients of the heavenly arrival tribulation elixir, a 6th-grade pill. If I have the heavenly arrival tribulation elixir, even if the heavenly arrival tribulation this time is more terrifying than in my previous life, I am confident that I can resist it. The corners of Tianyang's mouth curled up slightly. In his previous life, when he had entered the heavenly arrival realm, he was far from his current strength. However, that kind of heavenly arrival tribulation had almost killed him. Now, Tianyang really found it hard to imagine how powerful the heavenly arrival tribulation would be if he entered the heavenly arrival realm. Although he was still far from the heavenly arrival realm, Tianyang had to be prepared for a rainy day. Sanguinati, are you confident that you can take the 10,000-year blood demon lotus? Tianyang smiled and transmitted his voice to Sanguinati. Hearing this, Sanguinati was stunned. A trace of disbelief appeared in his soul flame. Take it, the 10,000-year blood demon lotus? It was extremely difficult for them to even block the attack of the 10,000-year blood demon lotus. If Tianyang didn't have the heavenly fire of destruction, it would be almost impossible for them to block the attack of the 10,000-year blood demon lotus and still be in a situation where they could advance or retreat. However, in their eyes, this was just a decoration. A 10,000-year blood demon lotus with at least 30 to 50,000 years of cultivation, in terms of strength, was about the same as an ordinary warrior half a step into the heavenly arrival realm. Although the two of them had killed the 10,000-year blood demon lotus in an instant in the past, they were now only in the sea of soul realm. Sir, Sanguinati hesitated slightly, but he didn't say that Tianyang was courting death. At that time, he was also one of the witnesses to the legend of Tianyang's rise. Naturally, he knew what kind of glorious past this 17 or 18-year-old youth had. At that time, countless things that were considered impossible had been accomplished by Tianyang. Now, although it was almost impossible to seize the 10,000-year blood demon lotus, but perhaps it really could be done? After it's done, I'll start to refine some pills related to soul power. When I have the materials and time, I'll set up a soul congregation formation. Seeing Sanguinati hesitate, Tianyang chuckled and added this sentence. This sentence immediately pierced Sanguinati's heart like a blade. In the next moment, rays of crazy light flashed in Sanguinati's soul flame. Sir, let's do it. In the next moment, Sanguinati took the lead. The bone sword in his hand exploded with a shocking light as he slashed out. Heaven-cleaving sword art, first strike. The blood sword ruler roared. In the next moment, a huge kill character condensed and slashed at the vines that were burning with raging flames. Swish! Being burned by the heavenly fire of destruction like this, the vine's defensive power had long since dropped to the lowest level. In addition, Sanguinati attacked with all his might without any regard for his life. The tenacious vines were instantly broken. After all, the pills to recover soul power and the soul congregation formation were simply more important to Sanguinati, who was only left with bones and a remnant soul. Others were not clear, but Sanguinati knew that Tianyang was not only the supreme of the sword path, but also the supreme of the alchemy path and the supreme of the array path. 10,000 years ago, he was the number one of the alchemy martial artists. Lowly ant, how dare you break my vines? At this time, a strange light flashed on the 10,000-year blood demon lotus. Immediately after, countless vines rushed out. As far as the eye could see, countless vines that blotted out the sky seemed to fill every inch of space. A suffocating, oppressive feeling suddenly erupted. Everyone's expression changed drastically. Take this sword. At this time, Tianyang suddenly roared, and a long sword in his hand flew out. Sanguinati's figure flashed and caught the middle-grade spiritual long sword from the Dragon Emperor's dragon tomb. His aura instantly soared to the extreme. In the next moment, a tyrannical power of the massacre domain covered his body. Tianyang's eyes turned blood-red, and he smiled slightly. The great void, sword embryo in his hand, emitted a bloody light. Chapter 662. Heaven-cleaving sword technique, 5th slash. Tianyang and Sanguinati roared at the same time. The power of the massacre territory was released to the extreme. 10 kill. Characters appeared in front of the 10,000-year blood devil lotus. Then, the 10 kill characters overlapped and became 2. Sorry, Sanguinati. I'll borrow your kill character first. But at this time, Heavenly Sun suddenly turned his head and chuckled. While the Bloodsword Emperor was in a daze, something that left him dumbfounded occurred. The 5th slash that he had used was out of his control. It rushed toward Tianyang's 5th slash. In the next moment, the heavenly flame of annihilation burned. The two 5th slashes merged into one just like that. Boom! Boundless murderous intent filled almost every corner of the space. Even the vines that were as tall as a giant tree that covered the sky suddenly trembled. Whether it was the combination of the two 5th slashes or the aura of the heavenly flame of annihilation, they were all afraid. Ant? Genius? Genius among ants. Blood. Blood. The 10,000-year blood devil lotus sensed the aura on Tianyang's body and shook its vines wildly. Its shallow intelligence suddenly screamed, "Blood! Kill!" In the next moment, countless vines lashed out like a storm, attacking Tianyang's sword. Tianyang's divine dragon body erupted to the extreme. In the next moment, a sharp light flashed in his eyes. Kill! In an instant, the huge kill character crossed the sky and charged toward the wall-like vines. Boom! The vines and the kill character collided. Bloody light and bloody light collided, erupting into electric sparks. The whole world shook because of this. The Tao Fire realm affected space. The spiritual Sea realm changed space. The heavenly Ascension realm controlled space. In terms of strength alone, even if Sanguinati and Tianyang, the two 5th slayers combined, they might not be able to match even 1/10 of the endless vines. The 10,000-year-old blood bewitching lotus could only control space at the sea of spirit realm at most. while Tianyang and Sanguinati were genuine reaching heaven realm warriors. A single word, kill, was enough to control the endless space around him. Break! Tianyang coldly shouted as the divine, desolate, heavenly spirit art in his body began to circulate crazily. Surging true essence surged out, and the word kill released a heaven-defying light that shattered the vines along with the space around them. Puff! Juice splashed everywhere, and countless giant vines fell to the ground. Some even smashed large areas of the ground. The army of 10,000-year-old blood demon lotuses instantly exploded. However, Tianyang's expression was indifferent, as if he had expected all of this. "My lord, is this 10,000-year blood demon lotus dead?" Countless vines were shredded, and even its life aura was rapidly fading away. Sanguinati relaxed his vigilance and walked over. Hearing this, Tianyang faintly smiled. "Dead? How is that possible? These vines are at most some branches and leaves of the 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus. The true life core of the lotus is still there." In the next moment, as if to prove Tianyang's words, when all the vines fell to the ground, the beautiful blood-red lotus suddenly let out an ear-piercing shriek. "Ant, you dare to break my vines. I will definitely refine you." The 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus crazily shrieked. In the next moment, a sound wave carrying countless soul attacks spread out in all directions. "You want to do anything to us with this kind of soul attack?" Sanguinati's expression changed slightly, but his face was still full of contempt. "If my body and cultivation were still here, one sword would be enough to destroy these attacks. Who doesn't know how to speak in hindsight?" "Wait." Tianyang had just chuckled when his expression changed drastically. He hurriedly looked at the people behind him. It was true that they could easily block the soul attack of the 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus, but the people behind them were genuine sea of soul realm cultivators. This kind of indefensible and illusory soul attack was originally very lethal. Moreover, they were almost completely unprepared. "Damn it! Take them in." Tianyang's expression darkened. He summoned the heavenly pagoda and took these people in. However, some of them were also injured by the sudden soul attack. "I miscalculated. However, if we kill this thing, we'll be fine." Tianyang's expression darkened. He had been on guard for so long, but he had actually neglected his teammates. Fortunately, he had reacted quickly. Otherwise, under the soul attack of the 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus, who knew how many of Tianyang's teammates would have died? "Kiki, lowly ants, if you submit to me and willingly offer up your flesh and blood, I can still spare your lives. Otherwise, your souls will be destroyed." The 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus swayed a few times and let out a piercing laugh. Hearing this, Sanguinati's expression also turned ugly. The middle-grade spiritual longsword in his hand released bloody, killing intent. Scram! Tianyang's expression was ugly. He snorted coldly and directly interrupted the threat of the 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus. Hearing this, the swaying of the 10,000-year blood demon lotus suddenly stopped, and the originally beautiful blood-red petals suddenly burned with a bloody light. "You refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Since that's the case, you can only die." The 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus roared angrily. Immediately after, bloody halos were released from the petals. In the blink of an eye, it had already spread to the entire field. Bloody, chaotic, disorderly, crazy, and other negative emotions, as well as countless soul attacks, were all directed at Tianyang and Su Yorong at this moment. Tianyang and Su Yorong's expressions changed. In the next moment, Sanguinati's soul fire trembled violently, revealing a trace of horror. This soul attack was actually so powerful. Even if it was him, he was still greatly affected. Beside him, Tianyang closed his eyes. These were the emotions of those who had died at the hands of the 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus before they died. These soul forces were also the soul forces that the 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus had plundered after devouring them. "Ha ha! Die, die. In front of my blood demon halo, no matter who the enemy is, they will all die. The 10,000-year-old blood demon Lotus let out a mournful laugh. At this moment, Tianyang's eyes slowly opened. What was revealed in his eyes was an undisguised killing intent. As expected of the blood demon Lotus, that so many powerhouses of the ancient era paid a great price to destroy. Such brutal means, unless it's someone who has no humanity, it's absolutely impossible to do. Since you've killed so many humans, you should pay for it with your life. Tianyang's expression was cold, and his tone was so cold that it seemed to come from the netherworld. In the next moment, the 109th pattern on the Divine Dragon's dragon core, the netherworld pattern, erupted with a brilliant light. The netherworld race's exclusive netherworld force erupted. Billowing soul forces gushed out, fusing into one with the killing intent and the netherworld force, transforming into an extremely powerful soul attack. Chapter 663. Nether Spirit's Wrath. Tianyang roared. Surging nether spirit power and boundless soul power surged out. It was as if a nether god was roaring. Using the soul power of a peak heaven ascension realm soul power and the purest nether spirit power from the nether spirit inheritance, he unleashed the most powerful soul attack in the world. Bang! The entire space was trembling. The formless, illusory soul attack had actually shaken the physical space at this moment. As for the 10,000-year blood bewitching lotus, it began to tremble in that instant. How is this possible? How can a skeleton, a human at the peak of 5th level C of soul realm, have such powerful soul power? The blood lotus roared crazily. In the next moment, rings of light bloomed, attacking Tianyang and Yuehan. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. However, seeing this, Tianyang only sneered indifferently. These rings of light seemed powerful, but they had no effect on the two of them. Nether Spirit's Wrath was one of Tianyang's most powerful soul attacks. In the whole Tianshao Great World, there were few who could withstand it. Tianyang rarely used Nether Spirit's Wrath. After all, once it was used, the lightest result would be the destruction of the soul. In ordinary battles, Tianyang wouldn't use it. Even if the opponent wanted to kill him, he would use his sword to deal with it. However, the 10,000-year-old blood demon Lotus had truly enraged the heavenly sun. Dragons had reversed scales, and those who touched them would die. For Tianyang, Ling Yuhan, Yu Jianshun, and the other companions were his reverse scales. And the blood lotus had launched a sure kill attack on them from the very beginning. Later, because of Tianyang's carelessness, they were almost killed by the blood lotus. Therefore, Tianyang's guilt and fury had turned into the most essential killing intent at this moment. Nether Spirit's Wrath. Tianyang coldly snorted. His soul force rapidly fluctuated as he once again erupted with another move. In the blink of an eye, all the halos were easily shattered by the wrath of the underworld. At the same time, the 10,000-year-old blood bewitching lotus was hit by the wrath of the underworld. Following this, the body of the 10,000-year-old blood lotus stiffened and began to tremble as if it had lost all its strength. A 10,000-year-old blood bewitching lotus that still has its own consciousness can be used as a medicinal ingredient. Unfortunately, you attacked my companion, so you can only die, Tianyang said indifferently. His eyes were filled with undisguised, terrifying killing intent. Even Sanguinati, who had attained his Tao through killing, trembled in fear when he felt the murderous intent. This killing intent was firm to the extreme and didn't contain any other emotions. There was only killing intent toward the 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus. Sanguinati had no doubt that if he went to stop Tianyang, the first person Tianyang would kill would be him. No. I can be a fighter, and I can be a pet. I can even be raised as a medicinal ingredient. Don't erase my consciousness. At this moment, an extremely mournful scream came from the body of the 10,000-year-old blood lotus. It had lived for tens of thousands of years, and its cultivation had reached 40,000 years. It cherished life more than anyone else. It had lived for millions of years before it gained its own consciousness. Then, it had spent tens of millions of years on and off to grow to its current level. If it had been lucky enough, the 10,000-year-old blood bewitching lotus might even have had a chance to break through the reaching heaven realm and become a longevity herb. Unfortunately, it had met Tianyang. Everything had come to an end. Not only will you be erased, but you will also become a medicinal ingredient when you die. As for now, just wait for your death. Tianyang glanced at the 10,000-year-old blood bewitching lotus indifferently. Then he smiled faintly and snapped his fingers. Crack! The remaining power of the wrath of the underworld exploded completely. Even though it had devoured so many people's blood and souls, the 10,000-year-old blood bewitching lotus couldn't resist at all. It was completely destroyed. Its consciousness and soul were all destroyed. The blood bewitching lotus that had lived for tens of thousands of years and cultivated for tens of thousands of years died, just like that. Sanguinati looked at Tianyang in horror. As a #1 Dan martial expert 10,000 years ago, Tianyang definitely knew the difference between a 10,000-year-old blood bewitching lotus with consciousness and one without consciousness. However, he had still done it. He had mercilessly erased the 10,000-year-old blood bewitching lotus consciousness, not leaving a single shred behind. When it came to enemies, he was ruthless and merciless. When it came to his own people, he would rather give up some benefits to vent his anger. Sanguinati looked at Tianyang with a complicated expression. Such a character couldn't be considered good or bad, but he was definitely the most perfect leader. This was also the reason why geniuses like Ling Yuhan, Zhou Ling Long Taiji, Ao Ling, Flying Sword, Yu Jianshen, and others stayed by Tianyang's side. Tianyang truly saw them as partners and not as people who used each other. The two dragons could have left after the Sky Hegemon Blade Emperor's tomb, but they didn't. This was because of Tianyang's charisma and leadership qualities. People with such leadership qualities were often the easiest to achieve great things. It's a pity that I didn't seize the opportunity 10,000 years ago, Sanguinati sighed softly. 10,000 years ago, when the Tianji Sword Emperor had just risen to power, it was actually the best time to make friends with him. At that time, although Tianyang was powerful, he had no influence at all. He had no foundation to speak of in the central region. Therefore, if someone sought refuge with Tianyang, even if it was just an ordinary friendship, they would be able to rise to the top in the future. It was a pity that there was no one in the vast central region at that time. As a result, until his death 10,000 years ago, Tianyang was all alone. Only a few people were on good terms with him. Only Sword Saint Zhou and Tianyang were very close. Now, Sanguinati had missed the best opportunity. Naturally, it was impossible for him to truly join Tianyang. The quality of this 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus is actually of the highest quality. No wonder it has so many vines and such strong control. Just as Sanguinati's thoughts were running wild, Tianyang had already finished harvesting the 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus. He stood above the blood pool and hovered in the air, holding a blood demon lotus the size of a human head in his hand. At this moment, the 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus had no consciousness. It was just a spiritual herb. However, it was even more bewitching and crimson. Waves of fragrance were emitted. Just smelling a trace of it was enough to shake one's mind and accelerate one's vital energy. As expected of the main ingredient of a 6th-grade medicinal pill. This effect is really not bad. Tianyang smiled slightly. Then, he raised his eyebrows and put the 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus into his space bag. His gaze drifted down and immediately saw the center of the blood pool, where the 10,000-year-old blood demon lotus was originally rooted. The blood water that would have surged up from the blood pool automatically stopped outside the center. The blood pool was about 3 meters deep, but there was no blood in the center. This was because there was an ancient book in the center. Chapter 664, 10,000 Blood God Technique. Looking at the ancient book in front of him that blocked the blood water and almost sealed the space, Tianyang's mind moved slightly, and he directly reached his hand in. Tianyang received the innumerable blood god technique without any hindrance. There wasn't even a wave-like barrier, so Tianyang effortlessly took it into his hands. At this moment, the blood water in the blood pool suddenly began to riot. Whoosh! The blood water suddenly rose into the sky and turned into a sharp water column, fiercely attacking Tianyang, bringing with it an incomparably powerful aura. This blood water originally condensed the essence of the blood of countless creatures. Just the energy contained in it had already far surpassed that of an ordinary Spirit King expert. And with this attack, even a Spirit King expert, if caught off guard, would be hit. However, Tianyang was clearly not among them. It seems that this 10,000 blood god technique is still quite important to this pool of blood. Seeing this, Tianyang was not the slightest bit surprised. With a faint smile, he extended his left hand, and the aura of a peak 5th level sea of Soul Realm instantly erupted. Boom! A terrifying energy wave instantly swept through the entire space. Immediately after, streaks of spatial power burst out, binding the blood water attack in place. Then it was forcefully crushed. Even the pool of blood water was burned into nothingness by Tianyang's casual flick of the heavenly flame sparks, leaving behind only the thick smell of blood in the surroundings. Suddenly, the blood pool that the 10,000-year blood demon lotus had accumulated for countless years was destroyed by Tianyang's attack, just like that. Generally speaking, even if it had lived for billions of years and only had a cultivation base of tens of thousands of years, no matter how old the 10,000-year blood demon lotus was, it would be impossible for it to have that level of intelligence. Tianyang casually collected the blood water, then flipped open the 10,000 blood god technique and smiled faintly. Of everything in the surroundings, only this 10,000 blood god technique is extremely special. Obviously, this is the source of the 10,000-year blood demon lotus's intelligence. Then, Tianyang's soul power swept through, and the information on the first page of the 10,000 blood god technique instantly entered his mind. 10,000 blood god technique, heaven rank middle rank technique. With blood as the foundation, with slaughter as the path, fight throughout the world, kill throughout the world, using the enemy's blood to achieve his own Tao. The first stage was the rebirth of flesh and blood. The second stage was the transformation of blood into weapons. The third stage was the transformation of 10,000 blood into a body. If one cultivated to the 5th level, the spiritual sea would turn into a blood sea, and one would be able to summon the existence of the blood god to possess one's body and unleash boundless combat strength. In just a few sentences, the entire 10,000 Tao blood god art was summarized. There were only 6 levels of the universal blood god technique, from the body refining realm to the reaching heaven realm. Moreover, it was a mid-grade heaven rank cultivation technique that specialized in the Tao of slaughter and blood. This technique is too vicious. Although it's stronger than Yuhan's Ice Emperor Heavenly Sword technique, it's clearly not suitable for Yuhan's Tao. However, it's extremely suitable for Sanguinati. Still, I'll have to wait and see. Tianyang muttered to himself. If a mid-grade heaven-class cultivation technique was placed outside, as long as it was someone who knew a little about history, it would definitely cause a bloody storm. According to Long Taiji, cultivation techniques did not really disappear from this world. Some martial Tao sacred grounds had already begun to restore cultivation techniques. However, 10,000 years ago, the great destruction of civilization seemed to have destroyed all cultivation techniques in the world. Only a few were preserved in special places, such as the cultivation technique left behind by the earthly emperor. After that, Tianyang read it carefully. The 10,000 blood god art used blood as its foundation and slaughter as its martial Tao. The first stage required the rebirth of flesh and blood. If one wanted to cultivate it, they would have to break their own skin and flesh, and even break their bones. Then, they would have to use countless heavenly treasures to supplement it. Their entire body would look brand new. If one succeeded in cultivating it, a pseudo-perfect 490 feet of blood chi would be nothing. One could even forge a body that was not inferior to that of a radiant chi realm cultivator. Moreover, if one cultivated it to the limit, they could even regrow broken limbs. The speed of recovery from injuries would be much faster than before. The first stage is powerful, but the pain and the use of heavenly treasures might not be too much. Unless one is a disciple of a large faction, it would be difficult to afford it. Tianyang muttered to himself. The second stage, blood to weapons, as the name implied, controlled blood chi and turned it into a weapon. If one succeeded in cultivating it, just their blood chi alone would be comparable to a middle-grade treasure. Moreover, one's control of true essence would surpass that of ordinary people by countless times. The third stage, 10,000 blood as body. From the first level to the fifth level, almost every level had an extraordinary change. This point seemed to have the same effect as the Divine Desolate Heaven Spirit Art. However, the Divine Desolate Heaven Spirit Art was created by Tianyang to allow his naturally terminated meridians to cultivate. From true essence, body, and soul, he had made a great breakthrough. As for the 10,000 Blood God Art, it was much weaker. It was only focused on cultivating the blood in the body. Compared to the Divine Desolate Heaven Spirit Art, it was much weaker. There's still a few martial skill sets at the back. I'll take a look when I have time. Tianyang chuckled. Then he put away the 10,000 Blood God Art. Although the 10,000 Blood God Art was extremely suitable for Sanguinati, Tianyang and Sanguinati had only been in contact for a short period of time. Tianyang wasn't stupid enough to casually trust others. At this moment, an anxious voice suddenly entered Tianyang's ears. Big brother. Not good. Big sister Yuhan has a situation. It was Yu Jinshan's voice. Hearing this, Tianyang's relaxed face instantly tensed up. A situation? What kind of situation would make Yu Jinshan speak with such an anxious tone? Moreover, the one who had a situation was Ling Yuhan. With a flip of his wrist, the heavenly pagoda was released. Without caring about Yu Jinshan, Tianyang directly rushed in. Just as Yu Jinshan was about to go out, he saw Tianyang rush in with an anxious expression. He couldn't help but be stunned for a second. Then, he immediately pointed at the incomparably weak Ling Yuhan. Big brother. I don't know what happened to big sister Yuhan, but she suddenly fainted. The few of us don't understand alchemy, so we don't know what happened. Yu Jinshan anxiously said. He knew how important Ling Yuhan was in Tianyang's heart. If something happened to Ling Yuhan, they definitely wouldn't be able to get away with it. It could be said that for Ling Yuhan, Tianyang could even become the enemy of the entire world. She suddenly fainted? Hearing this, Tianyang's face immediately sank. Then, he quickly walked over to Ling Yuhan's side. At this moment, Ling Yuhan's face had an abnormal flush. Her eyes were tightly shut. Tianyang stretched out his hand and touched it. He discovered that it was terrifyingly hot. If a piece of steel was placed on it, it would instantly melt. Soul strength. No, the source of her soul has been heavily injured. Tianyang's face was ugly as he determined Ling Yuhan's situation. As expected, the most dangerous situation still happened. The move of the 10,000-year Blood Lotus was too terrifying. Although they had blocked it, Ling Yuhan and the others might not have been able to block it. Ling Yuhan's soul strength wasn't her strong point. It was weaker than her cultivation. It was only because Long Taiji and the others were safe that Tianyang's judgment was disturbed. The source of her soul. Hearing this, everyone's faces changed. Soul strength was easy to recover, but the source of her soul was different. The source of her soul was the source of a person's life. If the source of her soul was injured, then the person wouldn't be far from death. To recover the source of her soul, she needs the soul heart pill. However, I don't have it on hand. Tianyang's face was extremely ugly. He violently hammered the ground and growled. At this moment, the veins on his forehead were bulging. The aura on his body was constantly fluctuating. He was already extremely angry. If he had known this would happen, he would have extracted the soul of the 10,000-year Blood Lotus and used the heavenly annihilation fire to burn it for 10,000 years. That, sir, Are you talking about the peak grade 5 pill, the soul heart pill? At this moment, Sanguinati suddenly walked over. The soul fire in his eyes flickered. Yes, Tianyang's face was gloomy. Chapter 665. You know, hearing this, Tianyang suddenly raised his head and stared at Sanguinati. His eyes were filled with tyranny. Tianyang had accumulated a lot of murderous aura before, but it was controlled by his powerful soul force and self-control, so it never exploded. But now that Ling Yuhan was seriously injured, the murderous aura that Tianyang had accumulated for so many years exploded in an instant. All that was left was a fuse, and this murderous aura would completely explode. Sanguinati had no doubt that if he dared to deny it now, Tianyang would definitely draw his sword and kill him without a second word. Yes, the reason why I explored the earthly emperor's inheritance was because my soul source was injured at that time, and I needed to find something to heal it. But because I found the demon emperor's corpse, I was severely injured by the demonic aura and became a skeleton, Sanguinati said. But in the process, I also found the place where the medicinal herbs and elixirs are placed in the earthly emperor's inheritance. Maybe there aren't any ready-made soul heart pills, but there are definitely medicinal herbs. Hearing this, Tianyang's face calmed down a little, and the tyranny and murderous aura in his eyes gradually faded. He wasn't someone who would kill anyone in anger. In such a critical situation, losing his mind in anger would only make things worse. Sanguinati wouldn't dare to deceive him. After all, he could kill Sanguinati with a flip of his hand. Sanguinati would only seek death if he was tired of living. But how far is that place from here? Tianyang asked, looking at Ling Yuhan's current situation. Because her soul source was injured, her soul force was constantly flowing away. Even if Tianyang used all his strength and used all kinds of methods, he could only prevent Ling Yuhan's soul force from flowing away. But the injury was still there. The time left for Tianyang was only a few hours. If this time was exceeded, no matter how powerful Tianyang was, he could only put Ling Yuhan into a deep sleep. This slumber lasted for an unknown number of years. Throughout history, there were many people who had died from deep sleep. That was why Tianyang was so furious and anxious. If we travel at full speed, we'll be there in less than 10 minutes, Sanguinati said. Hearing this, Tianyang no longer hesitated. He carried Ling Yuhan and walked out of the door without looking back. The speed of the heavenly tower was too slow. As for Long Taiji and the rest, they stayed in Tianyuan Tower. It wouldn't be too late to come out when they reached their destination. Lead the way, Tianyang stared at Sanguinati as he walked out of the Tianyuan Tower and put it into his interspatial bag. In the next moment, two figures suddenly soared into the sky and shot toward a certain direction, outside a palace in earthly emperor's inheritance. Due to the spectacular worldly tide caused by the appearance of earthly emperor's inheritance, a group of geniuses had already noticed this place and successfully arrived. I don't know why we were trapped in a tunnel for a few minutes. Fortunately, we're out now. A young man laughed. Hearing this, the others nodded. Previously, they had walked for a few minutes before they realized something was wrong. Some of them had walked for a few minutes and still hadn't come out. However, a few minutes ago, the strange phenomenon that seemed like a ghost hitting a wall suddenly disappeared, and this group of people was able to gather here. There were more than 1,000 geniuses gathered outside the palace. As time went by, there were more and more. By the way, this palace is so majestic. There must be a lot of treasures in it. At this time, the young man spoke. Hearing this, the others nodded. One of them held his forehead and revealed a greedy look. Of course, this is Earthly Emperor's inheritance. The Earthly Emperor's small world was created by Earthly Emperor. No matter what kind of hall it is, its value is extraordinary. Moreover, according to my speculation, this is the hall where pills and herbs are stored. In terms of value, I'm afraid the martial skill hall can only suppress it by a little. That person said greedily. Hearing this, the others' hearts trembled and their eyes burned. The value of the medicinal pill hall was considerable. Why was the status of alchemists so noble? Wasn't it because they could refine all kinds of miraculous pills? If they obtained these pills, why would they need to beg alchemists to refine pills for them? At that time, those high and mighty alchemists would have to submit to them. Most of these pills must be senior brother Pang's. On the other side, a few black-clothed youths laughed. Their bodies faintly emitted a trace of peak 4th level C of soul realm aura. In the center of them, a tall black-clothed man sneered. Of course, I, Peng Tang, am the young master of Heavenly Yin Mountain. How can I not obtain these pills? However, I heard that Sword King Tianyang has already arrived here. I just don't know where he is. The black-clothed man called Peng Tang sneered. He actually dared to kill my Heavenly Yin Mountain's young master by Zhuan. This person is truly audacious. If he appears in front of me, I will definitely take his head and avenge the many brothers and sisters of Heavenly Yin Mountain, Peng Tang said arrogantly. Hearing this, the others also laughed and flattered. Of course, Sword King Tianyang is but an ant. With senior brother Peng, young master Peng will definitely be able to kill him in a few punches and kicks. Hearing this, Peng Tang narrowed his eyes, clearly enjoying it. At this time, an ear-piercing explosion suddenly sounded. Bang, 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 bang. It was as if a bomb had detonated above the crowd. The rolling sound waves almost deafened the ears of the weaker ones. The crowd hurriedly turned their heads and saw two figures flying over at extreme speed from afar. One turned into a bloody light and was slightly in front. The other held a long sword. His appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but his speed was terrifying. Who are you? At this time, the Heavenly Yin Mountain disciple who thought he was the overlord of this place suddenly stood up and blocked the two people. He sneered. What are you two trying to do? Go in. Although Tianyang's figure hadn't arrived yet, a voice accelerated by vital energy had already reached that person's ears. Hearing this, not only the Heavenly Yin Mountain disciple, but even the expressions of the people around him changed slightly. This was especially so for Peng Tang. His entire face darkened. Even he didn't go in, but this kid wanted to go in too? He didn't even put him in his eyes. Impudent. Heavenly Yin Mountain's young master Peng Tang is here. Even he didn't go in. Who do you think you were to go in? The Heavenly Yin Mountain disciple said arrogantly. His words showed that he didn't put Tianyang in his eyes at all. Hearing this, Tianyang's expression immediately turned cold. A violent blood-red color appeared in his eyes. He had come this time to seize every second to save Ling Yuhan's life. This Heavenly Yin Mountain disciple want to stop him? Those who block me die. Tianyang roared angrily. The great void sword embryo appeared in his hand, and a terrifying sword light instantly erupted. Those who block you die? Ha ha ha. You actually dare to say this in front of senior brother Peng Tang. You bastard, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Boom! The sword light was extremely fast. Even before Tianyang's body arrived in front of the Heavenly Yin Mountain disciple, the sword light had already pierced through his body. The sword light had already pierced through the Heavenly Yin Mountain disciple's body and directly destroyed him. Chapter 666. Just one sword. With one sword, that Heavenly Yin Mountain disciple, a peak 4th level C of Soul Realm expert, died at Tianyang's hands. You're courting death. Seeing this, everyone was shocked, and Heavenly Yin Mountain's young master, Peng Tang, was immediately enraged. As the Heavenly Yin Mountain's young master, according to common sense, even disciples of martial Tao Holy Lands would give him some face. Even if they attacked, they wouldn't easily kill him. However, Tianyang didn't give him any face and directly killed him. Although his relationship with this person wasn't necessarily good, Peng Tang only felt that his dignity had been greatly challenged. You actually dare to kill my Heavenly Yin Mountain's people. You're courting death. At this moment, the other Heavenly Yin Mountain disciples came to their senses and furiously roared. They circulated their true yuan and directly attacked. Senior and junior brothers, let's attack together and kill this lawless, arrogant brat. Everyone from Heavenly Yin Mountain roared. In the next moment, the weakest was peak 4th level C of Soul Realm, while the strongest was Peng Tang, who had 6th level C of Soul Realm True Yuan. In terms of cultivation, perhaps they weren't at the peak, but with Heavenly Een Mountain's strange killing methods, their strength was something that even the Scarlet Flame sect didn't dare to lightly provoke. This was also the reason why Heavenly Een Mountain was so powerful. Wind, Fire, Sky, Palm. Dark Soul, Severing Fist. Dragon, Ghost, Sky, Burning Fist. Everyone from Heavenly Een Mountain roared, in order to kill Tianyang and leave a good impression in front of Peng Tang. This group of people was already going all out. Every one of them was a peerless Earth-tier martial skill. In the outside world, a single attack was enough to destroy a city. Unfortunately, they met Tianyang. You're the ones courting death. Tianyang's gaze was cold and severe. He held the unconscious Ling Yuhan in his arms and controlled the Great Void Sword Embryo with his left hand, slashing out. Sky Extreme Sword Art. First sword, Sky Soaring. Bang! Sharp to the extreme, the sword light seemed to be able to shatter everything in the world. It shot out explosively, causing the entire world to start trembling. And at this time, the attacks released by the group of Heavenly Een Mountain disciples also condensed and shot towards Tianling One's sword. Boom! Boom! A deafening explosion rang out, causing everyone's eardrums to hurt. However, no one noticed this at all. They just stared blankly at the sky, because, in their imagination, it should have been a one-sided situation, but there was a huge reversal. The truth was indeed one-sided, but it was Tianyang who had crushed the dozen or so geniuses of the Heavenly Een Mountain. Boom! The soaring sky sword light was like a hot knife through butter as it destroyed the attacks of the Heavenly Een Mountain disciples. In just a few seconds, the attacks released by the Heavenly Een Mountain disciples turned into the energy of the world, because they had all been easily destroyed by Tianling's sword. How is this possible? Everyone's expressions changed as they looked at the sword light in disbelief. The sharp sword intent coming from it made their hearts tremble. Where did this powerful genius come from? One sword, instantly killing a Heavenly Een Mountain disciple. It was also one sword that suppressed more than 10 Heavenly Een Mountain geniuses. Scram! Tianyang shouted angrily and raised the Great Void Sword Embryo in his hand. The light of the Great Void Sword Embryo, which was close to that of an upper-grade spiritual weapon, lit up the whole place. Boom, boom, boom. The sword light completely shattered the attacks of the Heavenly Een Mountain disciples and shot towards the Heavenly Een Mountain geniuses. Run! Seeing this, the Heavenly Een Mountain disciples were scared out of their wits. This sword light dealt with them easily before, as if it was taking a stroll in the park. Now, wasn't it easy to kill them? Unfortunately, in front of the soaring sky sword light, it was impossible to run, especially when the soaring sky sword light was unleashed in a state of rage. Poochie, poochie, poochie. The sword light passed through flesh and blood, producing a muffled sound. However, when they heard this sound, no one reacted at all. Instead, they looked at the bright sword light in the sky with horror. Every time a sound rang out, it meant that a Heavenly Een Mountain disciple was torn apart. Even if it was a soul, Tianyang wouldn't let it go. To him, stopping him now was equivalent to taking Ling Yuhan's life. If Ling Yuhan fell into a deep sleep because of this, Tianyang would charge out and slaughter the entire Heavenly Een Mountain, even if he had to risk the martial arts conference. Poochie, the last muffled sound rang out as corpses fell to the ground one after another. Blood flowed and dyed the ground red. In just a few dozen seconds, no less than 13 geniuses had fallen from the Heavenly Een Mountain. As the young master of the Heavenly Een Mountain, Peng Tang didn't seem to have realized what was happening at this moment. His subordinates had all turned into corpses in front of him. Peng Tang suddenly reacted. His eyes instantly turned blood red as he looked in the direction of the sword light. With just one look, the murderous intent in his eyes turned completely berserk. Tianyang! Peng Tang roared. In the next moment, he suddenly soared into the sky and charged toward Tianyang. Previously, They were still discussing how to kill Tianyang and obtain the astronomical reward that Vice Sect leader Bai had set in the Heavenly Yin Mountain. In the next moment, Tianyang appeared. After killing a Heavenly Yin Mountain disciple, he killed all the Heavenly Yin Mountain disciples, except for him. The dignified young master of the Heavenly Yin Mountain, Peng Tang, became a general without an army in a few dozen seconds. I said, "Those who block me die." Tianyang's speed didn't change at all as he coldly looked at the charging Peng Tang. However, he didn't care about the Heavenly Yin Mountain. In his previous life, the Heavenly Yin Mountain was almost uprooted. In this life, Tianyang didn't have the slightest bit of fear. He even killed Venerable Ironbone, not to mention the young master of the Heavenly Yin Mountain, who wasn't even a venerable yet, who was at the 6th level of the Sea of Soul Realm. "You're the one who wants to die." Peng Tang roared like a madman. In the next moment, a sharp dagger appeared in his hand. Immediately after, Peng Tang's figure suddenly disappeared from where he stood, as if he had merged with the air. In the entire space, not a trace of Peng Tang could be found. Seeing this, everyone was taken aback. Where's Peng Tang? He was just there. How did he suddenly disappear? This is the assassination technique of the Heavenly Yin Mountain. So Peng Tang's strength has already reached this level. TSK, Tianyang is in danger. Everyone exclaimed. Hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. The assassination technique of the Heavenly Yin Mountain? He didn't know how many times he had broken it, but Peng Tang still dared to use it in front of him? Die for me. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the air. The true Yuan of the 6th level of the Sea of Soul Realm burned, and a surging killing intent erupted. The dagger in his hand released an incomparably powerful and sharp chi. The sharp blade ruthlessly slashed towards Tianyang's neck. What? Seeing this, Sanguinati's expression changed greatly. Even he hadn't expected this scene. However, Tianyang only smiled coldly. The great void sword embryo in his hand seemed to have grown eyes as it stabbed behind him. Pucci, the great void sword embryo, was much longer than the dagger. Therefore, Peng Tang's blade didn't even get close to Tianyang before the great void sword embryo pierced through his body. Moreover, it was incomparably accurate, directly piercing through the heart. Didn't your master teach you this? Assassination techniques are not worth mentioning in front of people with truly powerful soul power, Tianyang said indifferently. Then, the great void sword embryo directly pierced through everything from Peng Tang's heart to his shoulder and returned to the air. As for Peng Tang, his eyes were unfocused as he fell down. The young master of the Heavenly Yin Mountain was dead. Chapter 667. Heavenly Yin Mountain's young master dead. Heavenly Yin Mountain annihilated. Seeing this scene, everyone's jaws dropped. It was as if a large duck egg could be stuffed into their mouths. They were dumbfounded. Heavenly Yin Mountain, among the first-rate forces, was the closest to a holy land of martial arts. Moreover, it was the king of the Tianshao Great World's underworld. With such a force, even some children had heard of its name. It could even make some powerful cultivators tremble in fear. There were very few people who dared to be enemies with such a force, let alone kill the young master and annihilate the entire team. In the end, Tianyang did it. Sword King Tianyang. As expected of Sword King Tianyang, everyone was speechless. They seemed to want to say something, but in the end, they couldn't say a word. Tianyang was too strong, so strong that they could only look up to him. Humph. Tianyang's expression didn't change. With a wave of his hand, these people's space bags immediately fell into his hand. In less than a millisecond, he plundered all the azure crystals and put them into the space bag. The most important thing now was to enter the elixir hall and get the soul heart pill. Then, Tianyang used the void step secret technique again and burst out with a speed that even half-step Ascension Realm powerhouses could only look up to. He arrived in front of the elixir hall's door. Sword King, the elixir hall is still sealed. According to our judgment, it seems that it will open at a certain time. Seeing that Tianyang seemed to want to go in, someone mustered up the courage to remind him. Hearing this, Tianyang frowned slightly. Then, without slowing down, he even sped up a bit and rushed over. Sealed? I'll directly blow him up. In the next moment, Tianyong slashed out with his sword. Sky Extreme Sword Art, Fourth Sword Firmament. Divine Dragon King Sword burst out. Divine Dragon Body released. Rolling Dragon Power was completely released. The sword that condensed all of Tianyong's strength suddenly slashed out. Rumble. It was as if the earth was shaking. The entire space, and even the entire Elixir Hall, was shaking. Tianyong frowned as he looked at the swaying door in front of him. Light gathered on the great void sword embryo as the divine desolate heaven spirit art circulated and slashed out again. Break! Boom! Two extremely powerful sword lights slashed out in succession. No matter how sturdy the doors of the pill hall were, they couldn't help but burst open, revealing the deep and serene space inside. As for Tianyong and the Blood Sword Monarch, they didn't hesitate at all and directly charged in. At this time, Yu Jianxin and Long Taiji volunteered to help Tianyong guard the door. Tianyong didn't hesitate and opened his spatial bag to let them out. Long Taiji was at the 7th level of Sea of Soul Realm, while Yu Jianxin was also at the 6th level. Compared to the young master of Moon Mountain, Peng Tang, they were only stronger. With them here as a deterrent, no one could even dream of entering the pill hall. They entered the pill hall. Tianyong released his soul power, not caring in the slightest whether he would suffer a backlash. He expanded the range of his soul detection to the limit. At the same time, Tianyong slowed down and said to Sanguinati beside him, "I'm only lacking a few ingredients for the soul heart pill. I've already collected a few. Now, there's only the soul heart grass left." "Then, where's that soul heart grass?" Tianyong's tone was cold. Hearing this, Sanguinati's mind trembled. Although he was an emperor, he didn't dare to anger Tianyong at this time. Instead, he tried his best to recall his memories and pointed in a direction. "It's inside. However, there might be someone obstructing us," Sanguinati said. Hearing this, Tianyong nodded and used the Void Step secret technique again, rushing over. Someone obstructing them? That was nonsense. The pill hall wasn't a place for earthly emperors to give benefits to people. According to the nature of these inheritances, one would have to go through many tests to get what they wanted. However, Tianyong wasn't afraid at all. "If you want to get the pill, you'll have to get past me." Just as Tianyong was flying rapidly, a barrier suddenly appeared in front of him. At the same time, a stone giant rushed out and roared at Tianyong. There was no consciousness in its blood-red eyes. It was a puppet at the peak of 5th level Sea of Soul Realm. Hearing this, Tianyong's face darkened. The great void sword embryo in his hand continuously slashed out countless sword lights. Boom, 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 boom. The stone giant seemed to have something to say. However, under Tianyong's countless sword lights, it instantly exploded into pieces of gravel and was swept into fine powder by the aftermath of the sword chi. There's even a supreme grade Reiki. But that's not important. Let's go. Tianyong raised his eyebrows and saw the Reiki lying in the gravel. He casually collected the supreme grade Reiki and continued to speed up. Roar! Not long after, another demonic beast rushed out to block Tianyong and Peng Tang's path. It was emitting a ferocious chi. It was actually at the peak of 6th level Sea of Soul Realm. However, Tianyong didn't hesitate at all and directly slashed out with his sword. In an instant, the demonic beast was killed by Tianyong. Blood gushed out of its mouth and it fell to the ground. Then, several more demonic beasts appeared to block their path. They were the bloodline of ancient beasts called blood-eyed white tigers. These blood-eyed white tigers were very powerful. Although their cultivation was only at the 6th level Sea of Soul Realm, they knew a strange soul attack. If Peng Tang had been here, he would have been killed by the soul attacks of the blood-eyed white tigers in an instant. However, Wrath of the Nether Spirit. Tianyong didn't even move his sword. He directly roared, and his soul power exploded, instantly shattering the soul attack of the blood-eyed white tigers and shattering their souls. Those who blocked Tianyong's path died. In the end, Tianyong didn't meet any more obstacles. The previous three obstacles were all he had. Tianyang and Sengwanati directly went to the deepest part of the palace. It was an open space. It didn't seem to be inside the palace, but inside a folded space. The sun was shining brightly, and the view was broad. Countless spiritual herbs grew freely on the ground. Tianyang could see countless precious spiritual herbs at a glance. Moreover, these spiritual herbs were all at the peak of their cultivation. Those with a cultivation limit of 1,000 years had reached a cultivation level of 1,000 years, while those with a cultivation limit of 10,000 years had reached a cultivation level of 10,000 years. Tianyang even saw a few herbs that were comparable to the 10,000-year blood demon lotus. However, they didn't have the almighty blood god art, so they didn't have spiritual intelligence. In the center of the countless spiritual herbs, a tall tree stood, connecting heaven and earth. The soul heart grass is over there. Tianyang's soul power spread out and instantly locked onto the unique aura. He directly rushed over. At this moment, an angry snort was heard. Who dares to intrude into the spiritual herb garden of the earthly sovereign? In the next moment, a huge tree branch flew over and blocked Tianyang's path. Tianyang was furious. He turned around and his eyes widened. Chapter 668. Infant Soul Fruit Tree. Tianyang was shocked. At his level, basically, there were very few things in this world that could surprise him. However, this infant soul fruit tree was not one of them. Infant soul fruit tree. The Blood Sword Sovereign's reaction was even greater than Heavenly Sun's. He even jumped up and down. His soul fire was flickering as he looked at the huge tree in horror. In the middle of the lush greenery, there were a few golden or silver fruits hanging on the tree. There were lines on the fruits that were shining with light. Streams of aura that could make one's soul relax was emitted. Just by absorbing a trace of it, one's soul would feel relaxed. Just the aura alone was so powerful. Although Sengwanati had not seen the infant soul fruit tree before, he was sure of it. After all, in this world, only the infant soul fruit tree could do this. The infant soul fruit was an extremely rare fruit in the Tianshao Great World. It contained a strong soul essence, but it did not belong to anyone. If one ate it, just by refining it, it could make one's soul power improve rapidly. For those who had suffered serious damage to their soul power, it was a supreme divine medicine. Ling Yuhan's soul origin was damaged, and it was useless for her to eat it. However, Sengwanati was different. The soul heart pill could restore soul power and heal the damage to the soul origin. However, the latter effect was stronger. The infant soul fruit could completely restore and strengthen one's soul power. If Sengwanati ate the infant soul fruit, his strength would be restored by at least 40%. At that time, he would be able to do whatever he wanted under the heavenly completion realm. Not bad. It seems like the two of you are not ignorant people. At this time, a conceited voice came from the infant soul fruit tree. However, the two of you actually trespassed into Master's spiritual herbal garden. This is unforgivable. Get out of here! The infant soul fruit tree shouted angrily. Its demonic power surged, and a huge tree branch suddenly flew out towards Tianyang. This move was powerful, but it did not have any killing intent. It seemed like the infant soul fruit tree was just doing its job. However, Tianyang could not let this tree do its job. Wait! At this time, Tianyang suddenly shouted. His soul power surged, and the soul power that belonged to the peak of heavenly completion realm was released. Amidst the sound waves, the infant soul fruit tree's mind shook. The tree branch that was about to sweep Tianyang away also stopped abruptly. Your master must be the earthly sovereign, right? The earthly sovereign died a long time ago. It's been billions of years since we came here. It's not too much to ask for a few elixirs, right? Tianyang took advantage of this opportunity. He could tell that this infant soul fruit tree's cultivation base was only at the peak of the 9th level of Sea of Souls realm. However, its body was huge. The entire tree was over 10,000 feet tall. Its lush and verdant crown practically covered the land within a radius of 10 miles. Although the heavenly suns and heavenly suns were stronger than it, the same couldn't be said for the consumption of energy. Now, they were in a hurry. Tianyang could not kill it in a short time, so he could only talk nicely. Now, hearing this, the infant soul fruit tree was startled. Then the whole tree shook. Indeed, Master is dead. The infant soul fruit tree roared miserably. It seemed like it was about to go crazy. Seeing this, Tianyang knew that it was not good. His soul power of the peak of heavenly completion realm suddenly shook. In an instant, the entire space began to tremble. Peak of heavenly completion realm. No, it needs an even stronger soul power. You brat, who are you? Why do you have such a powerful soul power? The infant soul fruit tree woke up and felt Tianyang's soul power. It was shocked. Hearing this, Tianyang smiled. Finally, he got this guy back. However, it seemed like the emperor did not tell the infant soul fruit tree about the inheritance before he died. It would be difficult to deal with this guy. To be honest, I've already obtained the emperor's inheritance and his soul power. That's why I have such a powerful soul power. You, Master's inheritance? The infant soul fruit tree was doubtful. Even though he was suspected, Tianyang's face didn't turn red and his heart didn't skip a beat. That's right. Although I'm weak, the earthly sovereign doesn't choose a strong successor. My talent is amazing. I have passed many tests. Naturally, I have obtained the emperor's inheritance. Moreover, the emperor's remnant soul told me that there is an infant soul fruit tree in the elixir hall that he had forgotten. He asked me to take good care of it. Tianyang lied. His face was very sincere. Judging from the infant soul fruit tree's reaction, this fool seemed to have never seen the world. The only person it had seen before was the emperor. Therefore, this infant soul fruit tree's intelligence was very weak. It was like a 5 or 6 years old child. What's so difficult to fool a child? Lord Emperor, hearing this, the infant soul fruit tree was moved. Its voice became a bit choked. The branch in front of Tianyang was taken back. The emperor also said that he did not treat you well at that time. Now, he wants me to help him take care of you. He also said that the only thing he left behind with his mark was you. Now, the only person who can bring you out and spread the name of the emperor is me. For you and for the emperor, quickly let me go. Heavenly Son said with a strong sense of righteousness. Hearing this, the infant soul fruit tree was actually moved and its treetop trembled. I will not disappoint Master's expectations. New Master, you can go. Since you have obtained the emperor's inheritance, then Master's spiritual herbal garden is also yours. The infant soul fruit tree said. Hearing this, Tianyang nodded. Thank you, senior infant soul fruit tree. Then, he rushed forward without looking back. Sanguinati, who was watching silently from the side, was speechless. Fortunately, he was only a skeleton now and couldn't make any expressions. He couldn't even laugh. Otherwise, the heavenly sun wall would definitely be exposed. However, Tianyang was not in the mood to care so much now. He rushed to the front of the soul heart grass. Tianyang suddenly squatted down and took it out. 10,000 years old soul heart grass. The best soul heart grass. Moreover, there were 3 of them. In other words, the herbs to refine the soul heart pill were complete. Tianyang was excited. He carefully placed Ling Yuhan on a flat hillside. Then he took out the shimming fire cauldron and released the annihilating heavenly fire. The 10,000 pill book flew out and hovered above Tianyang's head. The 10,000 pill book not only recorded countless pill recipes from ancient times, but also accelerated the refining process and helped the alchemist enter the state of mind. Countless soul heart pill herbs flew out, and the annihilating heavenly fire surged. The heating of the cauldron was completed. Chapter 669. The soul heart elixir was a grade 5 peak elixir. Tianyang had refined such an elixir before. However, the difficulty of refining the soul heart elixir was far more difficult than all the elixirs that Tianyang had refined before. The soul was illusory and could not be touched or seen. Even after reaching Wu Zun's realm and condensing the primordial spirit, it was still the same. The soul heart elixir was used to strengthen the soul power and restore the origin of the soul. It was closely related to the soul, and the difficulty of refining it was extremely high. Even with Tianyang's alchemy skills, he was not sure that he could succeed in one try. After all, it was too difficult to refine the soul heart elixir. Fortunately, there were countless treasures in the elixir hall of earthly sovereign. When a silly infant soul fruit tree heard that Tianyang wanted to refine the elixir to save someone, it automatically collected the herbs and helped Tianyang to get a few sets. Now, Tianyang had a total of 5 sets of herbs. The soul heart elixir is a grade 5 peak elixir. Herbs needed: soul heart grass, earth spirit fruit, heaven underworld water. Tianyang recited the elixir formula of the soul heart elixir silently. He gradually had confidence in refining the soul heart elixir. Then, he threw in the first set of herbs, and the Xianming fire cauldron suddenly burst out a bright light. The refining ability of the heavenly flame of destruction was instantly enhanced by a level. The stone-like herb was instantly turned into the essence of the elixir after it entered the cauldron. Not bad. The Xianming fire cauldron is indeed a famous and powerful elixir cauldron. It is indeed extraordinary, Tianyang praised. Then, he continued to refine the elixir in an orderly manner. There were many herbs needed for the soul heart elixir, and the refining process was extremely complicated. If Tianyang wanted to refine it successfully, he not only needed strength but also time. The Blood Sword Emperor and the infant soul fruit tree, who had nothing to do, naturally started to doze off. Outside the elixir hall, Dragon Prince, Long Taiji, we meet again. Long Taiji looked as if he was facing a formidable enemy. He looked at the person in front of him and said in a deep voice, "See you, what are you doing here?" To no surprise, the person who had appeared before Long Taiji and Yu Jianshan was the leader of the Buddhists of the Western region who had appeared in the tomb of the Sky Tyrant Blade, Saiyu. At this moment, Saiyu's cultivation seemed to have improved a lot. Even Long Taiji felt a bit of pressure. Naturally, I've come here to take back the Buddha's opportunity. Saiyu clasped his hands together and smiled. The prayer beads on his neck and wrist began to spin despite the absence of wind. A brilliant Bodhi glow appeared behind his head. Your Buddha's fated chance? Do all you bald donkeys from the Western regions like to use such bandit logic? Yu Jianshan mocked. Due to Tianyang's influence and his own experiences, Yu Jianshan didn't have the slightest good impression of the Western region's Buddhists. Hearing this, Saiyu's face sank slightly. Looking at Yu Jianshan, a Bodhi glow flickered. Benefactor, you're exaggerating. In the next moment, the Bodhi glow suddenly flashed and turned into a huge palm, sending Yu Jianshan flying. Boom! Yu Jianshan spat out a mouthful of blood as he was sent flying. He crashed heavily into the wall of the pill hall, breaking a few of his ribs. His aura had withered as he looked at Saiyu in disbelief. Wasn't this guy easily suppressed by Tianyang not long ago? How did he suddenly become so strong? On the other hand, Long Taiji had a grave expression. 8th layer of the Sea of Soul Realm. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed. They looked at Saiyu in disbelief and sucked in a breath of cold air. Their faces were filled with shock. Hua Lingri, Tang Fengling, Long Taiji, and Saiyu were the 4 strongest geniuses of the earthly Emperor Small World. There wasn't much difference in strength between them. They were all at the 7th layer of the Sea of Soul Realm. However, for geniuses of that level, it didn't affect them much. However, if one of them broke through to the 8th layer of the Sea of Soul Realm, then it would be a different story. Glorious Sun Spirit King Jun Tian was a person from 200 years ago. His strength was only at the 8th layer of the Sea of Soul Realm. Moreover, the Martial Arts Assembly had an age restriction. One had to be under 100 years old. Saiyu was at most 80 or 90 years old, but he had broken through to the 8th layer of the Sea of Soul Realm. How could they not be shocked? It seems like Dragon Crown Prince's eyesight is indeed extraordinary. Then, does Crown Prince still intend to block this poor monk's path? Saiyu smiled. Hearing this, Long Taiji's heart sank. He looked coldly at Saiyu. You should know that Tianyang is inside. Tianyang. These 2 words were like a curse, causing Saiyu's expression to instantly freeze there. He didn't have much contact with Tianyang. However, Tianyang's strength had thoroughly suppressed him. Even if he used all his strength, he wouldn't be able to delay an existence like Demon King Yinpe. However, Tianyang did it. Although he had the help of Sky Tyrant Blade Emperor, he still managed to kill Yinpe. In other words, Tianyang had vaguely possessed the strength of the 8th layer of the Sea of Soul Realm at that time. Now, he had obtained an opportunity to break through to the 8th layer of the Sea of Soul Realm. However, how could Tianyang not improve? However, according to the information he obtained, there was an infant soul fruit tree in the Alchemy Palace. The infant soul fruit tree could bear infant soul fruits, and the infant soul fruit could greatly increase one's soul power. Benefactor Tianyang? Although Benefactor Tianyang is powerful, this poor monk is not easy to bully. The charm of the infant soul fruit was too great. Although Sayu's heart was trembling, he still braced himself and said. Hearing this, Long Taiji was startled. Then his face suddenly sank. If that's the case, then we can only fight. Dragon King Divine Fist, 10,000 dragons slaughtering gods. Tianyang didn't know about the battle that happened outside the Alchemy Palace. Currently, Tianyang was anxiously looking at Ling Yuhan, who was lying on the ground and being fed the soul heart pill by him. New master, you don't have to worry. I can see that Mistress Soul is stable. Moreover, it's faintly strengthening. Nothing will happen to her. The infant soul fruit tree swayed and said. In the aspect of souls, he was an expert. Tianyang might not be as knowledgeable as the infant soul fruit tree. Hearing this, Tianyang was relieved. But why hasn't Yuhan woken up yet? Tianyang said worriedly. His luck was pretty good. He had successfully refined the soul heart pill in one try. After refining it, he immediately fed it to Ling Yuhan. However, 5 minutes had passed, and Ling Yuhan didn't show any signs of waking up. I don't know. However, Mistress Soul power is strengthening. This is something that I can be sure of. The infant soul fruit tree said. In the next moment, Tianyang's face suddenly changed. An extremely terrifying bloodline suppression instantly erupted from Ling Yuhan's body. Ling Yuhan's face suddenly revealed a trace of a demonic look. Her icy blue hair was instantly covered by white. The nine-tailed moon fox martial spirit was released. This time, the nine-tailed moon fox martial spirit changed from 6 tails to 9 tails. Ling Yuhan's body floated up and the 9 tails swayed. Then, a huge 9-tailed moon fox shadow rushed out from Ling Yuhan's body. Seeing this, Tianyang's eyes lit up. This is Chapter 670, Bloodline Awakening. This was Ling Yuhan's second Bloodline Awakening. The first Bloodline Awakening was when Tianyang opened the Bloodline seal in Ling Yuhan's body. At that time, her upper-grade yellow-class martial spirit had turned into the 9-tailed moon fox martial spirit. It could only be considered as a beginner awakening. After all, it was the God Bloodline Awakening. It was not an easy task. And now, in a situation that no one had expected, Ling Yuhan had actually undergone a second awakening of his bloodline. In other words, it was a complete bloodline awakening. I did not expect that even though her soul origin was severely damaged, she could still benefit from the disaster and awaken her bloodline awakening. The baby soul fruit tree's crown rustled, and its face was filled with shock. According to common sense, when one's soul origin was severely damaged, even after consuming the soul heart elixir, it would take some time to recover, not to mention a breakthrough. In the end, Ling Yuhan had undergone a bloodline awakening. This bloodline, it's not from the human clan. It's definitely not from the human clan. But why do I have the urge to worship it? The Bloodsword ruler's face was also filled with shock. He looked at the godlike, 9-tailed lunar fox in the sky in disbelief. He was extremely shocked. The human clan's bloodline was the weakest and most ordinary. Therefore, there was almost nothing that could suppress the human clan's bloodline. However, if the power of the bloodline awakening had reached a terrifying level, even if the bloodline awakening could not suppress the human clan, it could still suppress the human clan with its powerful strength. However, within the same rank, the human clan's bloodline awakening would not be suppressed. The nine-tailed moon fox is indeed the nine-tailed moon fox. It really lives up to its name. Tianyang muttered to himself. He was very pleased that his disciple had such an opportunity. As her master, he was naturally very happy. However, the one at the door come out. Tianyang's eyes suddenly turned cold. The great void sword embryo in his hand shone brightly, and a violent killing intent burst out, surging towards the door. I've been discovered. Sayu's expression greatly changed as he looked at the terrifying killing intent sweeping towards him. The staff in his hand suddenly smashed out, and he retreated several dozen feet. Only then was he able to block Tianyang's killing intent attack. However, his entire body was exposed in front of everyone. That bald donkey from Buddhism? TSK. Did you learn this trick from the rats of the heavenly mountain? Tianyang said calmly. The great void sword embryo in his hand flickered, and a blood-red color flashed across his eyes. Now is the critical moment of Ling Yuhan's bloodline awakening. It is also the moment when Ling Yuhan is at her weakest. Tianyang, do not let anyone interfere. Sword King Tianyang. As for Sayu, he looked at Tianyang, who was slowly walking over with an ugly expression. His heart suddenly sank. Tianyang's cultivation was still the same as before, but the mysterious aura around him had become even stronger. Do I really have the ability to deal with him? But behind him is the infant soul fruit tree. Sayu's gaze turned and looked past Tianyang. Instantly, he saw the infant soul fruit tree that was like a giant tree that reached the sky. His pupils suddenly contracted, and a greedy expression appeared in his eyes. In the next moment, Sayu's figure disappeared from his original position. Sorry, the infant soul fruit tree is mine. Sayu roared, and the staff suddenly flew out towards Tianyang. As for Sayu's figure, he entered the space and rushed towards the infant soul fruit tree. Infant soul fruit tree, a treasure that could greatly increase one's soul energy. Such a treasure appeared in front of Sayu. Even if Tianyang was obstructing him, he would definitely not give up. The infant soul fruit tree, that was a treasure that countless people dreamed of. You want to fool me with such a trick? Tianyang casually threw out a punch and directly sent the golden staff flying. Immediately after, the great void sword embryo in his hand slashed out and directly forced Sayu to reveal himself. What? Upon seeing this, Sayu's face changed. He did not expect his concealment technique to be so easily broken by Tianyang. He quickly blocked Tianyang's sword. Then, he turned his gaze and suddenly saw Ling Yuhan, who was in the middle of her blood awakening in the sky. This is the young girl who followed Tianyang around. Looking at this situation, it seems that this young girl is from the demon clan. Sayu's face changed slightly. Although he had never seen a nine-tailed fox, he knew that it was impossible for a human to awaken the blood of the fox clan. Since this is the case, this person is in the middle of her blood awakening. If I catch her, Tianyang will hold back, and the infant soul fruit tree will still be mine. Sayu's mind was spinning, and he immediately came up with a sinister plan. His body suddenly flashed, and the prayer beads turned into a top-grade spiritual weapon and instantly flew out. 6 words, great bright mantra. Sayu roared. 6 mysterious Sanskrit words and a central mantra formed a flaming curse wheel and instantly condensed. Together with the top-grade spiritual weapon power of the prayer beads, a terrifying power erupted in an instant. Even Tianyang's face changed slightly. However, Tianyang still smiled coldly. A loser dares to be impudent? In the next moment, Tianyang slashed out with his sword. Sky Extreme Sword Art, second sword, Heaven Cleaving. Boom! The flaming curse wheel formed by the 6 words Great Bright Mantra was instantly shattered by Tianyang's Heaven Cleaving sword. However, at this moment, Sayu disappeared from his original position. Where is he not good? Tianyang was stunned at first. Then, his face changed greatly. He hurriedly raised his head and saw that Sayu was rushing towards Ling Yuhan. Damn this guy. Tianyang's face was gloomy. Both his feet suddenly stomped on the ground and executed the secret technique of void treading. He exploded with extreme speed and rushed forward. "Ha! Tianyong, go back to where you came from." Sayu laughed loudly as he chanted Buddhist scriptures. The prayer bead that were sent flying by Tianyong earlier actually flew back and stopped Tianyong's body. Tianyong's speed instantly decreased by a lot. "You actually dare to attack the mistress." At this moment, Sanguinati and the infant soul fruit tree roared at the same time. Huge tree branches and blood-colored sword light burst out and blasted Sayu away. After the crisis was resolved, Sanguinati and the infant soul fruit tree no longer held back. They both executed their strongest attacks and rushed towards Sayu. If Ling Yuhan were to die in the hands of Sayu, Tianyong would definitely be furious. Not only would Sayu die, they might also die. Furthermore, Sanguinati, it depends on your performance. If your performance is good, I will give you a share of the infant soul fruit. Tianyong looked at Sayu, who was being attacked by Sanguinati and the infant soul fruit tree, and suddenly laughed. Hearing this, Sanguinati's body suddenly trembled. He looked at Tianyong in disbelief. Then his soul fire jumped crazily, and he almost went crazy. "Thank you for the reward. Bald donkey, die for me." Chapter 671. With Tianyong's promise, Sanguinati seemed to have gone crazy. All kinds of heaven-rank martial skills and earth-rank martial skills were used crazily, as if they were free. To Sanguinati, the importance of the infant soul fruit was too great. Even the pills that Tianyong promised to refine for him might not be as strong as the infant soul fruit. A silver infant soul fruit. If Sanguinati consumed it and refined it, he would be able to recover at least 40% of his strength and run amok in the spiritual ocean realm. A golden infant soul fruit. Sanguinati would be able to recover to the 3rd level of the heaven ascension realm. This was the hope of resurrection. How could Sanguinati not work hard? However, if Sanguinati worked hard, Tenyu would be miserable. Tianyong would never be merciful to people who wanted to make a move on Ling Yuhan. The people of Heavenly Een Mountain before, because they obstructed him from saving Ling Yuhan, Tianyong was completely annihilated. Now, this Tenyu came to him alone, and he had a grudge with him before. How could Tianyong be merciful? Not long later, under Sanguinati's violent slashes, Tenyu was chopped into a pile of meat paste. Fresh blood flowed, and there was not a single place that was intact. Burn it, it's disgusting. Even if Tianyong had killed countless people, he still could not accept it. This thing lying on the ground made him want to vomit. Hearing this, Sanguinati shuddered, and the way he looked at Tianyong suddenly changed. He directly beat Tenyu in such a ghastly state, and did not even leave a corpse for him after he died. The Tianji Sword Emperor looked amiable, but who would have thought that he was such a vicious and merciless person? Therefore, Tianyong's position in Sanguinati's heart rose again, in a situation where Tianyong did not know. His soul is still there, right? After burning Siyu's corpse to ashes, Sanguinati walked over. Tianyong raised his eyebrows and said, "Keep it." But he seems to have fainted from fright and won't wake up for a while. The Blood Sword Emperor handed over a blurry ball of light in his hand. "It's fine if he doesn't wake up. If he wakes up and still acts like a slut in front of me, I might just kill him in a fit of anger." Tianyong said indifferently as he put Sayu's soul into a small bottle. Then Tianyong raised his head and looked at the sky. At this moment, the 9-tailed lunar fox's shadow on Ling Yuhan's body became more and more solid. Ling Yuhan's body automatically went from lying flat to standing, as if she was standing in the void. Her eyes were tightly shut, and her white hair was fluttering in the wind. Her delicate face was like a painting. Behind him, 9 white foxtails danced. The next moment, Ling Yuhan's eyes suddenly opened. Boom! The whole spirit medicine garden was trembling crazily. Even 10,000-year-old spirit medicines could not help but droop down, and 1,000-year-old spirit medicines were even more unbearable. Their entire branches directly fell onto the ground, as if they were prostrating themselves in worship towards Ling Yuhan. An extremely terrifying pressure was released in an instant. Sanguinati's soul flame trembled a few times. The infant soul fruit tree was also shocked. What kind of bloodline is this? A wolf. At this moment, the snow-white nine-tailed lunar fox on top of Ling Yuhan's head suddenly raised its head and let out a long cry. Earth Emperor Palace, the northern wilderness, the entire Earth Emperor small world, countless demonic beasts woke up at this moment. They looked at the Earth Emperor Palace in the Earth Emperor small world. They bent down, kneeled on the ground, and bowed their heads in submission. The body-refining realm demonic beasts and the sea spirit realm demonic beasts did the same. Once the nine-tailed lunar fox bloodline appeared, all demonic beasts would submit. However, in the spiritual herbal garden, Sanguinati and the infant soul fruit tree could not say a word at this moment. Tianyang acted as if nothing had happened and walked a few steps casually. As expected of the god's spirit bloodline, this kind of pressure, even the divine dragon bloodline, could not be compared to it. Tianyang praised. Upon hearing this, Sanguinati and the infant soul fruit tree looked at Tianyang in shock. How could you speak? However, Tianyang did not notice it. He was looking at Ling Yuhan. After the nine-tailed lunar fox roared to the sky, it slowly sank and merged into Ling Yuhan's body. Crack! Within Ling Yuhan's body, a crack had also appeared on the bloodline seal that had not been completely opened. Crack! The nine tails retracted and Ling Yuhan's hair returned to its original appearance. In the next moment, the power of the martial soul burst out. Boom! The bloodline seal was completely broken. The nine-tailed lunar fox bloodline was completely awakened. Her hair turned back into a bloodline, and her golden eyes seemed to be burning with flames. On top of her head, two furry fox ears grew. Previously, Ling Yuhan had already awakened six tails. She was a mid-grade Earth-tier martial soul. Now, a tail was born. High-grade Earth-tier martial soul, seven-tailed lunar fox. Ling Yuhan's strength suddenly broke through from the third level of the Sea of Soul Realm to the fourth level of the Sea of Soul Realm. Another tail was born. Half-grade martial soul, eight-tailed lunar fox. Fifth level of the Sea of Soul Realm. The last, and also the biggest martial soul was born. Nine tails at this moment truly belonged to Ling Yuhan. In the tide of heaven and earth, tens of thousands of beasts bowed their heads. They danced with the wind. Heaven-tier martial soul, nine-tailed lunar fox. Ling Yuhan's cultivation also broke through four small realms and reached the seventh level of the Sea of Soul Realm. At this moment, Tianyang was already dumbfounded. From a six-tailed lunar fox to a nine-tailed lunar fox? From a mid-grade Earth-tier martial soul to a Heaven-tier martial soul? From a third level of the Sea of Soul Realm to the seventh level of the Sea of Soul Realm? This kind of terrifying speed of improvement, even Tianyang was dumbfounded. Although the sky-devouring secret skill was powerful, it was only temporary. And this time, Ling Yuhan's bloodline awakening had really broken through four small realms. Comparisons are odious. Tianyang opened his mouth and could only spit out these six words. Even with the Tianji Sword Emperor's broad vision, at this moment, he could only be dumbfounded. At the infant soul fruit tree, Sanguinati was completely shocked. This is the Lord's partner? She is indeed powerful. Sanguinati's heart was set off a storm, and so was the infant soul fruit tree. Desolate demon region. Thousands of beasts gathered. Countless beasts gathered. It was almost the headquarters of all the beasts in the sky continent. At the center of the desolate demon region, in a huge palace, after many years of recuperation, the nine-tailed fox clan had already recovered their peak strength. Now, they had become the supreme royal clan among the beasts. This was something that the nine-tailed fox Qianhan, who had been sleeping in Ling Yuhan's space bag for hundreds of years, did not know. In the nine-tailed fox palace, the man sitting on the throne suddenly opened his eyes, and two balls of light shot out. This is the nine-tailed moon fox bloodline. The middle-aged man suddenly stood up. From his body, the aura of a peak level 4 ascension realm burst out. This is definitely my daughter. My daughter. Men, Here, the middle-aged man shouted. Suddenly, two handsome young men appeared beside him. I can sense that my daughter has appeared. She is in the central region. Both of you are the geniuses of the nine-tailed fox clan. Both of you are half a step to Ascension Realm, so I trust you. Go bring my daughter back, the middle-aged man said. Hearing this, the two handsome young men were stunned. Then they nodded. Chapter 672. Tianyang didn't know what was happening in the Desolation Demon region that was thousands of miles away. At this moment, Tianyang was staring at Ling Yuhan. Huff! Ling Yuhan opened her eyes. Her 7th level C of Soul Realm aura burst out for a moment before it was quickly retracted back into her body. Her entire aura was restrained, as if nothing had happened. However, her snow-white hair, fox ears, and 9 tails that symbolized the 9-tailed moon fox were telling the world. What had happened here before? Master, Ling Yuhan blinked her eyes and retracted her 9-tailed moon fox martial spirit. Then, she looked at Tianyang, who was smiling below her. Suddenly, she became excited and directly pounced on him. Then, Tianyang was caught off guard and was bumped into by Ling Yuhan. His entire body was almost hugged by Ling Yuhan. Speaking of which, Ling Yuhan had not stopped growing in these 3 years. When she was in the Soaring Cloud sect, Ling Yuhan was already 156 meters tall. 3 years later, although she was still slightly inferior to Tianyang, she was only half a head shorter. Being hugged so suddenly, Tianyang's entire body was almost completely covered. All right. There's so many people here. Aren't you afraid of being seen as a joke? Tianyang smiled and pushed Ling Yuhan away. However, his left hand was still holding Ling Yuhan's right hand. He glanced at the infant soul fruit tree and sanguinati. The threat in his eyes was self-evident. If the two of you dare to speak of what happened before, don't blame the Sword Emperor for being merciless. How could the two who had lived for who knows how long not be able to see this point? They hurriedly nodded and didn't care whether they were human or not. They both swore that they wouldn't dare to speak a single word. As for Ling Yuhan, she felt that her right hand was wrapped by a white but not tender big hand. Tianyang's warmth could be felt, and her face turned red. However, he did not resist. Speaking of which, Yuhan, are there any side effects from the awakening of your 9-tailed lunar fox bloodline? Tianyang said. If it was a normal bloodline awakening, he would not say anything. However, Ling Yuhan's bloodline awakened after her spiritual origin was severely damaged. Although there was a saying in Firmament Continent, Tianyang was very concerned about it. What's more, she broke through 4 minor realms as soon as she awakened. Even Tianyang was dumbfounded at such a terrifying speed. He was afraid that Ling Yuhan's foundation would be unstable. It's fine. The soul heart pills concocted by Master are very useful. If it weren't for Master's soul heart pills, I wouldn't have been able to maintain my soul power while in the state of comprehension. Ling Yuhan smiled. Tianyang nodded. Moreover, this bloodline awakening not only helped me increase my strength and martial soul's power, but also allowed me to awaken some of the 9-tailed lunar fox's inherited memories. I have more than a dozen Earth-class martial skills, half a step to Heaven-class martial skills, and even Heaven-class lower-class martial skills. Ling Yuhan said excitedly. The 9-tailed lunar fox had the bloodline of a deity, so it was naturally powerful. Other than its own strength, which had reached a terrifying level, it would also have inherited memories. Tianyang knew about this. However, no matter how clear he was still envious and jealous. The reason why he had so many martial skills was completely because of his previous life's various life and death struggles, killing and robbing. Every time he obtained a high-level martial skill, it would be accompanied by a reign of terror. Ling Yuhan, on the other hand, had only awakened her bloodline. Her cultivation had broken through, her martial soul had evolved, and 3 inherited memories had appeared. The only danger was Tianyang's soul heart pills. Thinking about it, Tianyang was simply a master with full marks. This spiritual herbal garden is rich with spiritual qi. The infant soul fruit tree controls the entrance. Sanguinati, go to the entrance and let Long Taiji and Yu Jianshun in. They must have suffered some injuries. This spiritual herbal garden is rich with spiritual herbs. It is a good place to heal their injuries. Tianyang smiled. Sanguinati nodded. At this moment, he was obedient to Tianyang. After all, the infant soul fruit, which was related to his life and death, was hanging on the infant soul fruit tree. And the infant soul fruit tree obviously only listened to Tianyang. If Tianyang did not agree, Sanguinati would not be able to snatch the infant soul fruit, even if he was beaten to death. Therefore, for the infant soul fruit, and also because of Tianyang's strength, Sanguinati directly became Tianyang's follower. After a while, the heavily injured Long Taiji and Yu Jianshun were brought in by Sanguinati. They actually suffered such serious injuries. This Tianyu really deserves to die. Ling Yuhan had also heard from Tianyang about what had happened during the process of his bloodline awakening. Thus, he was extremely furious with Saiyu. Now, Long Taiji and Yu Jianshun were also heavily injured by Tianyu. One of them had a bowl-sized hole in his right chest. Blood was flowing out. Sanguinati had to step in to stop the bleeding. The other one had cracks all over his bones. Some of his ribs were even broken. His face was extremely pale. More than half of his life force was gone. Seeing this scene, even Sanguinati was furious. If I had known, I wouldn't have let him die so easily. Sanguinati roared. Hearing this, Long Taiji and Yu Jianshun were stunned. Tianyu died? However, Tianyang did not let the two heavily injured people doubt. In his left palm, the myriad pill tome floated. In his right hand, he held the mysterious underworld fire cauldron and walked over. With a wave of his hand, countless 1,000-year-old and 10,000-year-old elixirs containing life force appeared in his hand. With the earthly sovereign's elixir garden, it could be said that Tianyang could not refine any of the elixirs in the myriad pill tome. Annihilating heavenly flame, rise. 9 dragons cycle technique, open. The flames in Tianyang's hand burned fiercely. 9 golden-black fire dragons rose into the sky and began to refine the elixir. At this time, in the outside world, a group of people still did not dare to enter after seeing Long Taiji and Yu Jianshun heavily injured. However, when Sanguinati took the two away, they directly rushed in. However, it was a pity that this medicine hall only left them with cupboards after cupboards of air. Sighing, because of the infant soul fruit tree, the elixirs in the pill hall were not in their eyes. Previously, with Yu Jianshun and Long Taiji intimidating them, no one dared to enter. As a result, these things all benefited Tianyang. F*CK. There's nothing. A person suddenly smashed the empty porcelain bottle in his hand and roared towards the sky. As for the other people who had dug 3 feet into the ground, they were like this roaring youth, empty-handed. These things are definitely in Tianyang's hands. The youth roared, Tianyang may be strong, but he can't swallow so much wealth alone. Let's go. Let's go crusade against Tianyang. No matter how strong Tianyang is, if we join forces, we can definitely defeat him. The youth roared at the crowd. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed slightly. Some people immediately ran away, as if their feet were smeared with oil. As for the others, they cupped their fists and smiled. Brother, you're really brave. However, I'm just a mediocre person, so I don't dare to participate in such a big matter. Yes. This kind of thing, brother, it's enough. We don't have enough talent. If we go, we'll just embarrass ourselves. Let's leave first. Brother Liu is right. Everyone cupped their fists and said. Then, like mice that had seen a cat, all of them ran away. He swept through the geniuses of the 4 holy lands, and the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace's Dragon Prince was only a gatekeeper. Previously, he had destroyed the Heavenly Een Mountain and wanted to go in, but he had not come out until now. Was this Tianyang someone they could afford to offend? In a short while, only the youth was left in the huge pill hall. He turned his head stiffly and looked at the surroundings where there was not a single hair left. He immediately forced a smile. I'm just joking. Lord Sword King, please don't blame me. Chapter 673. Tianyang rested in the Spirit Herb Garden for an entire week. There was nothing he could do about it. He had gained too much from the earthly emperor's inheritance. If he didn't find time to properly digest it, Tianyang suspected that he would forget what he had gained. First of all, there were the spoils of war from killing that group of enemies. Tianyang didn't kill many people. The most powerful ones were Heavenly Een Mountain's young master, Peng Tang, and Xianyu from before. Therefore, among the treasures Tianyang obtained, the only two high-grade spirit tools came from these two. Heavenly Een Mountain and Western Region Buddhism probably had high hopes for these two. Otherwise, high-grade spirit tools, which were practically sect-guarding treasures, wouldn't be easily given away. Even the strongest geniuses of the forces were the same. However, now it was Tianyang who had benefited. A high-grade spirit tool dagger, tasteless to eat, but a pity to throw away. Useless, Tianyang fiddled with the dagger he obtained from Peng Tang. It was dipped in poison, and with the attack power of a high-grade spirit tool, if it fell on an ordinary ninth-layer sea of Soul Realm, the opponent would have to bear the consequences. However, this kind of treasure was still suitable for the group of assassins from Heavenly Een Mountain. For people like Tianyang, there wasn't much of a demand. Also, high-grade spirit tool prayer beads. This is even more useless. It's simply trash. Tianyang put down the dagger and took out the other high-grade spirit tool. It came from Xianyu's prayer beads. Things like prayer beads could only be used by Buddhist disciples. Otherwise, for people who didn't know Buddhism, it was just a hard rock that looked good. Forget it, I can't use these two things, and others can't use them either. When will I melt them and feed them to the great void sword embryo? Tianyang muttered and put away the two high-grade spirit tools. He wondered what Peng Tang and Xianyu would think if they heard this. The Tianyang that they were so proud of, and even considered a great treasure in the sect, was like a chicken rib in the hands of Tianyang. No, it was worse than a chicken rib. It was simply dog food. Chicken ribs were meant to be eaten by humans. Dog food, this was completely feeding dogs. The current Great Void Sword embryo was a pinnacle middle-grade spiritual weapon. It was only because of the uniqueness of the Great Void Sword embryo that it was comparable to an upper-grade spiritual weapon. And the result? Tianyang actually wanted two high-grade spirit artifacts to become part of a middle-grade spirit artifact. This was crazy. However, Tianyang didn't care. A bird in the hand was better than 10 in the bush. No matter how valuable the prayer beads and daggers were, they weren't things he could use. It would be better to convert it into something useful. As for the other scattered items, Tianyang didn't really clean them up. He left them all to A.O. Ling, who had been playing minor roles, to clean them up. In the end, Tianyang reaped the rewards. Low-rank spirit stones, 0. Once one reached the Sea of Souls realm, low-rank spirit stones were nothing more than broken stones. Even if one threw them on the street, no one would want them. Middle-grade spirit stones, still 0. Upper-grade spirit stones, 32. 846-790-000, 2,864,220 crystals, supreme-grade Reiki, 84,518. When A.O. Ling sorted out so much wealth, he was completely dumbfounded. More than 30 billion high-grade spirit stones. This wasn't the tens of billions of low-grade spirit stones that Tianyang extorted from the Nangong and Dongfang families of Night Sky City, but high-grade spirit stones. If added up without inflation, so many high-grade spirit stones were enough to buy the entire Night Sky City, and there would still be a surplus. As for Reiki, although the number looked much smaller, in terms of value, it was still above high-grade spirit stones. After all, Reiki was the hard currency between Sea of Souls realm cultivators and Heaven Ascension realm experts. It was also the best thing to use for cultivation. Spirit stones were still stones in the end, and there was still a trace of impurities. Even high-grade spirit stones had a trace of impurities. If used for cultivation, it would be fine if there was only a little, but if there were too many, the impurities would gather in the body, and it would be very troublesome to remove them. However, Reiki didn't have this concern, and supreme-grade Reiki was even more so. If these Reiki were all converted into energy that Tianyang could absorb and refine, then at the very least, it would allow Tianyang to break through to the peak of the 7th level of Sea of Souls realm. If it were another genius, they might have already touched the boundary of half-step Heaven Ascension realm. However, Tianyong walked the path of defying the heavens and condensing an endless spirit sea. Every step he took required an extremely large amount of energy as support, which was why his cultivation progress was slow. Reiki is settled. Then, all that's left is martial skills, Tianyong muttered. If these Reiki were used to set up the vast ocean spirit gathering formation, perhaps the entire Snow Gale Nation would be covered. If they were used to absorb, for Tianyong to absorb all of them, probably 5 days. It couldn't be helped. Tianyong's endless spirit sea was just that tyrannical. The counting of martial skills was much faster than a Reiki. In general, there were 108 Earth rank martial skills, 12 Supreme Earth rank martial skills, 3 half-step Heaven rank martial skills, and not a single Heaven rank martial skill. Next was the medicinal pills. 3rd-grade medicinal pills were hard to count. 4th-grade medicinal pills were at least 1,000. 5th-grade medicinal pills were 28. There were also some miscellaneous items, such as treasure cultivation experiences and so on. However, for the Tianji Sword Emperor, these things were even disgusting to use as toilet paper, so he didn't count them. However, even so, Tianyong still made a lot of money. Using upper-grade spirit stones and even Reiki, there was no way to properly summarize the treasures Tianyong obtained on this trip. Although later on, the people before the earthly emperor's inheritance were also counted. But to be able to obtain such wealth was also terrifying. It's equivalent to 5-star sword sex, or more than 10-night Sky City, Tianyong muttered. Hearing this, Ling Yuhan was dumbfounded. However, these riches were only things that Tianyong couldn't use right now. After stuffing them into the space bag, Tianyong ignored them. Right now, Tianyong's top priority was to cultivate the Myriad Blood God technique. The Myriad Blood God technique, as a mid-grade Heaven rank cultivation technique, was incomparably powerful. Although it was much weaker than the Divine Desolate Heavenly Spirit Art, it was still extremely extraordinary. At the very least, behind the Myriad Blood God technique, there was no strange, powerful, and extremely fast low-grade Heaven rank movement technique, the Divine Desolate Heavenly Spirit Art. Although the current Tianyong was fast, most of it was reflected in the secret technique of stepping on the air. His short-distance flipping and moving was far inferior. The half-step Heaven stage, 9 Heaven Wandering Dragon steps, could still be used when he was in the Dao Fire realm. However, as Tianyong's strength improved, the 9 Heaven Wandering Dragon steps had already fallen behind. Fortunately, there was a movement technique in the Myriad Blood God technique. Low-grade Heaven rank movement technique, Myriad Path movement technique. Tianyong muttered to himself as he looked at the flamboyant ancient text.